everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and over the last couple of days, I would describe what's gone on with the Minnesota Vikings as being a little heavy. There's been a lot to parse through. There's been some things that have been confusing, maybe to you Vikings fans infuriating, and maybe even to us who cover the team every day, a mystery. And we've done our best here on the show, along with you guys, to try to work through all that and try to get to a place where we understand what happened to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in this era. Where are things going? Who's in charge now? The questions that we are faced with going forward. And of course, as we go throughout the night here on this live stream, we will talk about it more, and your questions and comments and thoughts and feelings on what's going on and what's next are certainly welcome. I wrote a story today over at purpleinsider.football about the different fits for available quarterbacks that I want to talk about a little bit, because I did a ton of research on a few different key categories that I think are necessary for the Kevin O'Connell offense. And I looked at all the data for a bunch of players who might have a chance to become a quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll dig into that as much as we can. But I thought, maybe we should try to have some fun. And I've only been talking about the GM as being something that's, heavy on the fan base. How about the fact that, Sam Darnold's in the Super Bowl and everybody on Super Bowl Radio Row is talking about how could the Vikings let go Sam Darnold and all that sort of stuff. So what I wanted to do for tonight was shift a little bit to something fun. And what do you think fun is in my world? Fun in my world might be what I was doing last night, which was watching some random playoff game from 2001 between the Raiders and Jets, where Jerry Rice went off and had an amazing playoff game for the Raiders. Fun could also be a mock draft, a draft simulation, and that is what I would like to dive into here tonight. Now, earlier this year, when the Vikings suffered a brutal loss to the Seattle Seahawks, I did a draft simulation here on the show. So I cannot call this officially my first draft simulation, since I did one after that as sort of a passive-aggressive way of analyzing the football game, like, hey, let's get right to the draft. Although the Vikings went and won more games, complicating their situation in the draft, and now they are set to pick 18th. So why don't we jump right into what I did in this draft simulation, the players I picked, the players that I could have picked and chose not to. Not that I have a great amount of knowledge before the combine of these guys' athleticism and where everything shakes out, because I think that clarifies a lot of these draft boards and makes it easier with the PFF system to use the mock draft simulator, which all of you can go over and toy with that yourself if you want. But, a pre-combine, we're quite a ways away from that. That's going to be a couple weeks from now. Purple Insider will be there, of course. But how about a first glance? Why don't we call it that? The first glance. The Vikings fans need this draft sim. That's what we'll call it. First glance, Vikings fans need this draft sim. Let's begin with the results. So what I did in this draft simulation was I traded down. Now, I understand the irony of someone trading down after the GM whose firing was vaguely connected to one time trading down and having it not work out. But don't worry. I did not trade way out of the first round. I just way to the back of the first round. I just traded down a couple spots. I went from number 18 to number 21 to pick up an additional third round draft pick, the 99th selection overall from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason that I did that was, I'll show you how the entire first round played out. The reason I did that was, when you look at the first round and the players that I'm familiar with and think would be really interesting for the Vikings at the very top, like Jeremiah Love, he went 4th overall to the Tennessee Titans, which would be insane for them to draft a running back. But the Titans might be insane. Jermod McCoy, a corner, he went in the top 10. Caleb Downs, also top 10. Carnell Tate, top wide receiver. Peter Woods from Clemson, the defensive tackle, he went 10th. Mekhi Lemon, a wide receiver I'm intrigued by, he goes 11th. So a lot of the players, Mansour Delane, I think is how it's pronounced for LSU, went 13th. And a lot of corners here were going in this first round. Avion Terrell, he ends up going 15th to the Tampa Bay Bucks. And then someone who I've had my eye on, which is Caleb Banks, the defensive tackle from Florida, he goes 17th to the Detroit Lions. So I was sitting there looking at the board going, okay, well, I can take a defensive tackle here. I could take a tackle, but I'm not ready to have that conversation about Christian Darrisaw and taking a tackle. I could pick Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, if we're talking about maybe moving on from TJ Hawkinson. But, you know, a lot of these options are offensive tackles and some run stuffers. So I decided to go with the defensive tackle from Georgia after trading down, picking up a late third round pick, Kristen Miller, who is not as big as the Ohio State defensive tackle, Caden McDonald. As you see, he was on the board as well. He's not as big as Caden McDonald, who is really built like a fire hydrant, but there is, at least from the data and taking a quick look at this just to start, I feel like more pass rushing upside is shown in the data from Christian Miller. And if you look at the guy, he's pretty darn big too. Now, these heights and weights, they're going to get a lot more specific once we get the combine, but a defensive tackle who can come in and contribute right away as a run stuffer and then have potential to grow into a pass rusher, I think is very interesting for the Vikings in this draft, because it speaks a little bit to the draft where there are more run stuffers than there are pass rushers on the interior. So if you get one who's really good and then has upside, okay, I think that this defense can use it, that there is a strong chance that they move on from Javon Hargrave. So you'll have Allen, you'll have Redmond, but you can use a little more meat in there. You've got Levi Drake Rodriguez, who played almost 500 snaps, but you like to have a rotation along the defensive line. So give me a guy who can stop the run, is a high-level talent that goes to Georgia, a top university, and see if you can stuff the run a little bit better with him in there for this year. And then, you know, going forward, maybe develop. Now, this isn't the type of crazy win now type of move. And if we go back to how the first round played out, I had a lot of trouble finding that move, because we've talked about that a little bit. If a coach is running the team, then, hey, you're looking for who can help you right away. Maybe that move would be trading up to get a corner like Avion Terrell. Maybe that move is to take the wide receiver here. Kwesi Concepcion from Texas A&M was the top wide receiver taken after where I was picking as the Vikings. And Denzel Boston was another guy who was taken, I think, was he taken in the spot right after. So he would have been on the board too. Denzel Boston from Washington, not Denzel Washington. But yeah, I mean, you guys know from many years of following the show, a lot of you, how I feel about drafting wide receivers, which is always draft wide receivers. And I mean, with Jordan Addison having some troubles and, you know, Jalen Naylor potentially on the way out, I don't think it's a crazy idea. It feels a little crazy, but it's really not. I mean, if you look at the Chicago Bears, I kind of laughed at them when they took a tight end in Colston Loveland, and man, that guy turned out to be pretty good. They end up getting Luther Burden. You can never have too many weapons, and when you have some uncertainty when it comes to your quarterback situation, you can never insulate them enough with great players around them. So that is more on brand for me, but I also wanted to try to get a day one contributor who can fill a spot that the Vikings are really missing and then also has long-term potential. But I did not go without getting the the second round running back, which we've been talking about a lot. I went with Jadarian Price with the 49th overall pick here, which PFF didn't really like either one of my first two picks. But the thing that I really like about Jadarian Price is that he has a couple of seasons where he is averaging in the range of 6 yards per carry. And Jeremiah Love was their guy. He was their superstar. But even as their change up back, Jadarian Price put up really great numbers. And it kind of reminded me of Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. Like, it wouldn't be the first time, even if you go back to, gosh, Auburn had 2 running backs there that were very good. Cadillac Williams and the other guy who did the Wildcat. Someone can remind me of that. But, it happens sometimes. I think Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders both went to Oklahoma State and were there, I believe, at the same time. So it does happen. Jadarian Price, it's all about explosiveness here for me in the Vikings backfield. They have a guy who can run over people, a Leroy Horde of sorts, or, maybe it's not quite a Chester Taylor because he was a really good all-around back. And I think they have their one-dimensional slam forward back in Jordan Mason. They need a lightning for that thunder. Speaking of those Raiders teams, it was Charlie Garner and Tyrone Wheatley. They need the thunder and lightning combination, and Jadarian Price can come in. Now, the question is, will anybody be able to pass protect? So they might still need a veteran third down type of back to be able to pass protect if CJ Ham retires. But I think what you need is 30-yard runs. I mean, they just did not have explosive runs last year. And clearly, you look at where the Vikings were coming from in bringing in Frank Smith as an assistant coach. He was in Miami. They had Devin Achane. That's a crazy explosive runner who ripped off a bunch of huge runs and averaged almost 6 yards a carry. Well, who are they looking to emulate? Obviously, it would be the Miami run game and Devin Achane. So I like that idea of Jadarian Price. You get a high-level talent, but you don't have to spend a first-round pick. And if we look at some second-round pick running backs, I mean, you got some real stars in that range that you didn't necessarily have to spend a high first. The first one that comes to mind for me is Jonathan Taylor, second-round pick, and ends up being a superstar. So the Vikings take Jadarian Price. My third selection, this one I got a little bit lucky, I felt like, but, centers just don't go super high. So I went with the center, Jake Slaughter, to come in, compete right away for the starting center spot, maybe with Brandel, maybe with Juergens, but I look at those guys as those guys are backups. So you probably need a veteran who could start 17 games. I mean, maybe that's Brandel, but what I'd be looking for here is a high level type of prospect who can come right in and help your run game. He's going to have to learn on the fly. Yeah, there's no doubt about that, but it help your run game right away. And if you have a healthy offensive line and you have a fairly highly drafted center, a very highly drafted guard, a very highly paid right guard, and then 2 of the best tackles in the NFL, that sounds pretty good to me for a starting spot. So I end up with Miller, Price, and then Jake Slaughter, the center, in the third round with the 82nd overall pick. With the 97th pick, now this is where I'm starting to learn about some guys, and hopefully you are too. I have all of a sudden decided that I really like Bud Clark out of TCU. How about that? That is now officially draft season that I have decided I like Bud Clark out of TCU. And here's why. Because when you look at his numbers, what do you guys think that I found? Is a very versatile type of player, right? Somebody who has played in the box, somebody who's played as a slot, someone who's played as a free safety, and has very good overall numbers as a playmaker, which I think they can use whether Harrison Smith retires or not. I think a playmaker to come in right away. And here's something about these draft picks is that at least 3 of these positions generally contribute right away. Defensive tackle. Now, center is a little different. Like usually top centers do start. So I guess I could say all of them. Guards is a little bit harder to make that transition, but usually top centers who are drafted start pretty quickly. So all these positions are not really the long development route. The guys who end up, peaking when they're 26 or something. Not really. And that's one of the reasons to go with a safety. It's a quick transition to the NFL if you are good at it. So I took Bud Clark from TCU, and then a cornerback who I was, okay on. We're at the third round. This was the pick that I got from the Steelers for moving back Malik Muhammad, a outside type of corner who had decent numbers in zone, decent numbers in man on PFF. So that's why I went with him. I know almost nothing else about Malik Muhammad, but there we go. There is the first Purple Insider. We're going to try to have some fun, unofficial first mock. I forget what I called it, of mock draft season, etc. So there it is. What are you giving it? What's your grade for the first official mock? Now, as you can see, PFF was not super thrilled. They gave me a B overall and said it was in the bottom 36% of Vikings draft. So clearly some fans are outperforming the Purple Insider by PFF's metrics. But here's what I like about it is it addresses a lot of things that the Vikings need without doing anything crazy. So I get a little extra draft capital, but that extra draft capital is not on day 3 where you're drafting, I don't know, the future long snapper after Andrew DePaulo retires in the year 2030 or you're not. Day 3 is just swings and darts and so forth. I was able to get, by moving down and sliding down in the first, an extra player that I think could contribute right away, or at least be depth right away, which the Vikings are severely lacking at corner. So I think, at least trying to grade myself here, that I could have been a little wilder. I could have been more aggressive. I could have gone wide receiver at first and just to go full, Purple Insider and go wide receiver at first and said, all right, we're trading, because you can actually trade players now on the PFF thing. We're trading Addison and we're getting this and we're doing that. And okay, but I didn't want it to be too convoluted. It's a long draft season. So I wanted to play it a little slow and work my way up. And I felt like I got the things that they need the most. And if 3 of those players turn out to be guys that can contribute in 2026, then you're benefiting a lot. And the other guys need to develop, then they need to develop. But I think it could benefit the team right away. Their positions that can help right away. And not really any unnecessary risks, but also positions that I think are really important. Not premium necessarily, but really important to what they need right now. So let me take a look at your responses. Let's see. Jay's giving me a C+, no starter in round 1 or 2. I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think that Kristen Miller starter, but I mean, if he gives you 500 snaps, is pretty good. Jadarian Price could be either the starter or a duo back. I mean, you look around the NFL, there's a lot of duos. I mean, there always kind of has been, but yeah, I see what you're saying, like starter, but fairly significant contributors right away. And what starting position? I mean, center, but there's no first round center. What starting position's up for grabs on the Vikings roster right now? Like, clearly up for grabs. Even outside corner is filled with Rodgers and Murphy, probably safety. But when you go back and look at who was taken in the entire first round, you get Caleb Downs taken at 8th overall. There is not another safety on this list. Now, if I wanted to reach into guys who were mocked in the second, there were a couple safeties. So this is where your argument could be. There were a couple of potential safeties that I could have taken. Let's see, Dylan, I think it's Thieneman from Oregon, a guy who played all over the place. He could be a potential starter right away. Brandon Cisse, who is a cornerback from South Carolina, potentially could win a job there. If they move on from TJ Hawkinson, Kenyon Sadiq is somebody you could bring in. He's the tight end from Oregon. And then there's a very intriguing prospect, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, who is kind of a box safety, but like took over games in the MAC. But that's asking a lot for trying to get somebody in to contribute right away. So Thieneman was somebody I thought about, but if I was going to do that and take the safety, I think at this juncture, before we have a better sense of how the board is going to play out, or at least we think we do, it feels to me like that would be another trade back, and then you're doing it, which is okay. But it would be really funny if they fired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, then traded back all the way to the back end of the first and took a safety. I mean, that would be ultimate trolling if the Minnesota Vikings did that. So clearly, Jay was not a fan of my first attempt. Ron says if Addison is traded, first round should be wide receiver. That I agree with. And when you look at the first round, there's a lot of good wide receiver prospects. It actually reminds me of a couple years ago where it was when it was Addison and it was Flowers and everyone was saying, oh, you know, even Quentin Johnston's turned out to be pretty good. Everyone was saying, well, there's no superstar. There's no generational talent in this draft. I think Tate is really good, but it feels kind of like that, where there's a lot of good wide receiver prospects and maybe not necessarily superstar wide receiver ones. But even then, Jackson Smith-Njigba was the first wide receiver taken that year, I believe. So, you know, you can become a good wide receiver too and be extremely, extremely valuable. So I agree with that. If they were going to trade him, then yes, you are taking a very different approach and you're starting with a wide receiver. Doomer KO gives a B. I know Doomer can be, you could be a hard sell on things like this. I mean, your name is Doomer, so you can be a tough sell. P. Gullick says, not flashy, but I would be upset, wouldn't be upset over those picks. Love the Slaughter pick for sure. The problem with the Jake Slaughter pick, so he did, you know, drop to the third round in this, is that there's just not other centers. So if Connor Liu is the other one, I think he's coming off an ACL injury. So if you're going into this looking for a starting center, at least as of the way things look right now, there might be one or two guys, again, who you could take early, and it is early in draft season. Someone could be a riser. There could be someone we don't expect, but at least the way things are being presented right now is that there's only really two guys that could be day one starters. Maybe there's another one that I'm not aware of to take that high. So if he's there, yeah, you've got your starting center. And if he's not, I don't know. Let's see. Gazinkad says can't make your first mock too good, so you have room to improve. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's why I'm saying this one I played pretty safe, and I really like Jadarian Price. I did see him play with Notre Dame. You know, obviously they're on TV a lot, and the explosiveness is what I'm looking at there. But you know, he didn't have huge volume of numbers, but I kind of like that. Like come in with fresher legs. Jeremiah Love was the one that had all of the attention on him. And you're probably looking at someone who's not going to be that number one right away because you traded for Jordan Mason and Mason's good. So you want that. Like you want multiple guys who can keep your backfield fresh. Kenneth Walker is better than, and I know he's out now, but Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker's better than Charbonnet, but I thought that was really effective. And then you look at Walker toward the end of the year, and he's still pretty spry. So you want that. In 2024, I really thought Aaron Jones just wore out, and they were trying to bring in Cam Akers for the fifth time and so forth. And, you know, it just wasn't quite the same. But Aaron Jones just got banged up down the stretch. You want to have somebody who's like a younger running back, as even if he's RB2, but he carries the ball 150 times, catches some passes, makes some explosive plays right away. And then with the potential of being the RB1 in the future, I like it. Not a Twerk is only giving me a C, says the first round pick is a Kwesi type pick. I don't really understand what you mean by that. Do you mean like in what way is it a Kwesi like pick? He's a defensive tackle who can contribute right away, but has pass rush potential. I mean, he's not a guy who is Jadeveon Clowney or something and got a lot of sacks in college. So it's not someone who's going to come in and blow the doors off of offensive linemen. But I mean, when you look at defensive line and how valuable interior pressure is and defensive line performance on the interior has been in recent years, you don't have to look too much farther than like a Byron Murphy for Seattle, or this guy is not probably Leonard Williams, but Leonard Williams, he comes over from, was it the Giants? Was it the Giants? I think it was the Giants or Jets. Which bad New York team gave up Leonard Williams? Giants, right? So he comes over there in a move, but he was a top draft pick. So they've got tons of talent on the interior of the D-line. And who else is there? Christian Barmore, another guy that had good pass rush numbers, but I don't think was a megastar pass rusher in college. So I'd have to go back and check on that. But I feel like Barmore was an all-around type player. So I'm looking at potential impact right away on the interior. And here's the other thing, and if we're trying to contextualize it with this year, I mean, you're going to have a really good defense to compete. You're facing Caleb Williams. You're facing the Lions, who are really going to be going all in on improving from last year. You're facing the Green Bay Packers, who, look, you can say Jordan Love's not that great and so forth, but their offense has been successful with Jordan Love. So you're facing teams across the board that they do run the ball effectively. All of those teams, right? All those teams run the ball and build their pass games off of it. It's not just who's quarterback, but they all build their pass games off the run game. So I don't know what you mean by it's a Kwesi-like pick. I mean, I think that it's a position that is maybe undervalued still. Steven says, I agree with PFF. First two picks are somewhat lacking. Sure, a decent floor, but maybe better than Kwesi. I mean, Kwesi first round picks are Jordan Addison, Donovan Jackson, Dallas Turner. So those guys have all become good players. You don't have to do that with the first rounders. I mean, I think, whatever. I wrote the huge story. You guys have heard me talk about this. Volume of picks is something that I did here that maybe deviates from recent Vikings performances in the draft. They have had half as many top 100 players as the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. So I tried to get them more top 100 players. If you want to succeed in the draft, that's how you have to do it. So that's what I aim to do. By trading back, maybe I didn't get the more exciting player, but the problem is, when you guys are grading and look, I agree with, hey, let's not give our best ever effort here when we're talking about, February 4th, but I'm looking at the board sort of struggling to see who would have been had I stayed at 18 and not gotten a corner in the third. If I stayed in 18, I mean, you've got tackle, you've got a wide receiver, which I think everyone would be excited about. I promise I will do that at some point, and they might. You got a tackle, a guard, a run stuffing defensive tackle, another tackle, an edge rusher, another tackle, a linebacker, a tight end, a wide receiver. Like, I don't know what, if I had taken any of those players. I mean, maybe you're looking for the safeties, because this is just how the PFF board played out. But there are two safeties that have first round potential in Dylan Thieneman and Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who could be day one starters, could be day one contributors and potential difference makers. So, I mean, maybe that would have been a little bit more flashy than the defensive tackle, but I think that defensive tackle overall is a more valuable position than safety and harder to find. I did this last year. I went through, if you're going to draft a defensive tackle, you better do it high, because almost, what was the stat? It was like, of the 15th highest paid defensive tackles, 13 came from the first or second round. I mean, that's how it usually goes. That's where the best players are. But I think that position has always been extreme, with you have to draft it high, and it's a big impact spot. Bradley gives it a B+, Super Rod also a B+. The guys, Dan says the guys you picked have great names. I definitely agree with that. Those are some winning football names. Jake Slaughter, Jadarian Price. I believe in this fully. If a guy's name sounds like he's going to be awesome, he'll be awesome. I mean, I'm just kidding, but Barry Sanders and Lawrence Taylor and Deion Sanders, like, those names are amazing. Reggie White is an awesome name. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe that's Purple Insider's new analytics is, does Jadarian Price sound cool? Yes, he does. Jake Slaughter, your name is Slaughter as a center. That's awesome. I'm drafting you. Even Malik Muhammad sounds like you can hear a play-by-play person saying, intercepted by Malik Muhammad. This is just analytics, folks. This is why you turn into the show. Not a Twerk says Slaughter had a good Senior Bowl and he's consensus center 1, should be great at outside zone blocking. And this is like times of flat circle or whatever, but the outside zone is clearly what they're going to use. And they were when they were a healthy offensive line last year with Jordan Mason. And now Mason, if Aaron Jones is not back, is your RB1 to go along with someone else, and you're looking to have that athleticism as an offensive line. Like, think about on the left side of the line, the athletic profile. Now, Fries is more of a mauler for sure, but on the left side, Donovan Jackson, elite athlete at that position. Christian Darrisaw, if he's 100%, elite athlete at that position. If you had another top-notch athlete to center, I think you're in really good shape. And, I've seen a few people sort of like justice for Garrett Bradbury, as proof that you can have that guy if you kind of work it right around him. But I actually thought Garrett Bradbury over his couple of years with KOC was better than he was early in his career. And it does take time sometimes. But when you think about, like, Bradbury costs them sometimes under certain circumstances with certain matchups. Akeem Hicks, Kenny Clark, that exaggerated, and the few times they faced Grady Jarrett, that did exaggerate the perception because more games were just normal and fine than not, but he would get like a 0 grade when he would face Kenny Clark. And I think that would make it a little bit harder. During the KOC era, I never thought that he was the problem, but I did think it was a weakness that if you had other people around him, it could have been helpful and it might have been better. And that's the thing, is that every single player at every single position has context. And we tend to not always get that with offensive linemen because it's so complicated the way that they all meld together. And if we look at the guards, and this is a Jake Slaughter point, because even if he sounds a little bit like Garrett Bradbury, it's like that doesn't mean it can't work with Donovan Jackson and Will Fries. If we look at the number of guards that poor guy went through over the years, Oli Udoh, what? That guy, he was started Tom Compton, right? Was that still him? No, that was that Elfline starting with Tom Compton? Now I can't remember. Yeah, that must have been Elfline starting with Tom Compton. So you had, you just had this slew of Dakota Doziers and Drew Samias and all sorts of different backup caliber players rolling through. Blake Brandel never played guard before. Okay, why don't you go play guard for 17 games and it'll be fine. And then finally they get 2 good guards. I would not say, Jackson's there yet or Fries lived up to the potential, but he's, a pro quality guard. And, Garrett Bradbury goes to New England and ends up in the Super Bowl. So, there was a little, I saw that Bradbury admitted to texting Sam Darnold, like, congrats on beating the Vikings after that victory earlier this year. But, with Jake Slaughter, to bring it back to him, even if there's a similar profile there, if you can run the ball, I heard Clint Kubiak talking about this last night, that like running the ball does protect your quarterback in some ways. Staying ahead of the sticks, getting free first downs where you didn't have to drop back. And if you have to keep dropping back and dropping back and dropping back to pass because you're getting behind, because your defense fell apart, because you paid Kirk Cousins too much or whatever it might have been, it puts a lot of strain on your line. And it's not a huge shock to me that someone, and I won't include Ed Ingram in this because he did not pass block very well this year and got destroyed in that playoff game. But, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury, and Bradbury's numbers weren't great either, but them sort of mitigating the impacts of those players by working off the run, working with play action. And if you never really have a run game that's a threat, I think it's a harder thing to do. If just passing every single play worked, I think teams would do it, right? That's sort of Indianapolis with Peyton Manning kind of throwing almost every play and then handing off occasionally to Edgerrin James. But it doesn't. Like, it's a necessary thing to help the quarterback. And the Vikings have, and I think it helps the line too. I think it doesn't just help the quarterback. I think it helps the line. When you look at Seattle, this is a crazy stat for you. When you look at Seattle, their offensive line actually grades slightly lower than the Vikings by PFF. But they were playing from ahead all year long with their great defense, their good quarterback, their good receiver, and their good run game. And they leaned on the run game on early downs. And they were able to mitigate some of their shortcomings and bring along a rookie guard in Gray Zabel, Jake Sundell, an inexperienced overall center, bring him along. and not feel like they were at a massive disadvantage because they were staying ahead of the sticks. I mean, it's still like these principles of things that have existed forever. We can move the sliders as the game grows, but it doesn't fundamentally change that helps and it matters. So I think even with New England, Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson, they've leaned on those guys. They also have an athletic quarterback. Nothing is in a bubble. We can't evaluate an offensive lineman in a bubble because their quarterback could run away. The Vikings didn't have a quarterback who could run away. Will they in the future? I have no idea. Currently they do. Bud Clark is not a starter. Jay, we can't do it. We can't do this. We can't do this. You have no idea if Bud Clark is a starter. I just found out who he was today. We can't do this. We're not there yet. Not Its Work says that Bud Clark had a good Senior Bowl. So there you go. A guy named Bud Clark. That's a name who can't bust. Yeah, well, and my dog is named Buddy. So, we call him Bud. So I had to go with that. No, it was really based on, I took Bud Clark based on more of his defensive profile fitting Brian Flores. That's what I went with. He needs a safety. He needs a guy who can play all over the field. And that's a position that can start generally right away. Jay said they need a second round safety. Now that's true, but those guys were not there when I got to Jadarian Price. So I would have had to reach on them, at least by how the board worked right now. And I didn't really want to do that. Oh, Ronnie Brown was the one that I was why was I not able to think of Ronnie Brown earlier? So I didn't really want to reach like 10 picks higher than the projection at this moment. Those projections might change. If some of those guys go to the combine and light it up, then those guys might change. And when you're talking about seeing Nicky Manware, for example, everyone's going to be talking about like, hey, who is the next Nicky Manware that we can find? And that might push up, and you've seen his value. It might push up the safety value a little bit more in the draft for one of those guys. Possible, right? Possible. Guitar person. We're all mock draft experts. Hey, I welcome the critiques because we are now in draft season. We were in fire GM season for earlier this week. So now we're in let's have fun picking apart Purple Insider's first mock draft and talking about the approach. I'm having a good time and I hope you guys are too. Let's see. A C grade from Bruno. So Bruno did not love it overall. Dan says pick 18 always and forever. Yeah, I understand. Brandon says 0% chance you get a third round for dropping 3 spots in the first. I mean, I don't know. 0% chance. There's nothing that's 0% chance. But it was the 99th overall pick. Is that really valuable? If somebody had something they really want, and the PFF trades, you can hack it and it can be kind of ridiculous. So I try not to do that. But they are based on, like their analytical charts that teams are using more for their draft value. So, I mean, I could pull up, different charts and try to prove it to you, but that's what I was able to get. I don't think the 99th overall pick's that valuable though. If someone really wants a player, then yeah. Miller over McDonald, you need to learn these prospects. Okay, so here's the thing though. Like Miller is, I think, at least a good prospect on paper right now. Now, if you're saying, hey, you haven't, watched every bit of tape, well, that is true. And I don't know if that would actually do me any good. The rank between the two different on PFF is 21 versus 29. So Miller is lower. But here's my thing is that Miller this year, he didn't have a lot of sacks, but had a pass rush win rate of over 11%. Had a run defense grade of over 90 and then a pass rush grade of 70. And he weighs in at 6'4" and 310. Also, not to mention that, he's on a little bit of the younger side compared to these 24-year-old prospects. So I get what you're talking about, but he lined up in different spots and has a little more, at least on paper, ability to penetrate. When I look at McDonald, I just see a guy who is a fire hydrant. I mean, he barely pressured the quarterback. His pass rush win rate was almost 0. So his run defense grade, this was my thinking. And look, this is going to be better for me than it is trying to watch a bunch of plays from the guys and being like, I don't know. I know how to watch. Don't make jokes about McCarthy, about the camp practice. But, I know how to watch pros practice and pros play because that's what I do all the time. But when it comes to draft season, how they're going to translate and what they look like in college, I mean, it's easier for me having used 10 years of data to look at things that translate than it is to try to be like, well, you could see his foot angle there. Like, that's just not really my thing. But with Caden McDonald, he's a guy that did not get after the passer at all. And if you didn't have any pass rush win rate in college, you're not going to develop it in the NFL. Whereas Miller did. And both guys played at a very, very high level. Their run defense grades were very similar. Run stop rates were similar. Only one guy showed pass rush. They're both huge, fat people. One guy showed potential and the other guy really didn't. So, maybe, look, I'm picking it off of a lot of what the data says right now, and how people do at the combine and what comes out after that could change that. And Hunter, I know Lee Hunter is getting talked about a lot. He might move up. Clearly you're a guy that, wants to pay attention a lot to the draft, which is cool, but this is February 4th. So we're in the very, very beginning of this. However, if Miller gets drafted higher than McDonald, I don't know. I feel like you owe me a milkshake or something. That's what we're going to have to start doing. We're going to have to start making bets with each other here on some of these things. If you come and say, hey, there's 0% chance of this trade, like, all right, well, if you think there's 0% chance. So anyway, Gazinkad, Everson Griffin was a 4th rounder at pick 100. Yeah, I don't know how they do the comp picks or whatever on here. I think that they try to project the comp picks on PFF. But either way, when you're getting a back end of the 3rd round player is not a hugely valuable pick in general. A Diet Dr. Pepper. There you go. If Miller goes ahead of McDonald, I just don't see, like, Tyleik Williams went high. And what was that worth? Are people drafting these fire hydrant run stuffers really high with no pass rush potential whatsoever? I'm not sure that I see that in this draft, possibly. And McDonald looks like he's really good at his job. And Lee Hunter, as you mentioned, really stood out at the Senior Bowl. He might end up moving up, but I'm always going to look for somebody that has pass rush potential as well. And I think that, Miller just looks on paper like he has more. So at least at this moment, everything can change. 310. Yeah, I know, Steve, I know that 310 is not huge. It's also certainly big. He's big enough to play a run stuffing defensive tackle and get after the passer. I was unaware that there was a person out there who absolutely hates this player that I drafted. That's intense, Steven. That's just intense. It's a little much for me for February 4th. We'll work through it together, you and I. Dan says, this running the ball and staying ahead of the sticks you speak of, what is this concept? My team wants to know. Yeah, look, I clearly the thing that is still going to drive success, always and forever in the NFL, is passing efficiency. I think we all know that the more you can hit on downfield throws, the 2 MVP of the league were playing in the Final Four. That's often the case, right? And when I've looked through the bar to entry to reach the Super Bowl over many years, passing efficiency has often showed up. But what's been coming up a lot lately is interior defensive line too. And I know you're referring to the run game. Interior defensive line depth has also been coming up a lot lately for teams that go deep into the playoffs. So I'm just saying about that. But when you're talking about the running game, those things always apply, even if you have Matthew Stafford. Now, do you have to be the best run team in the league or the most efficient? I don't think so. And when you look at Seattle's numbers, they're really not like going to wow you when it comes to like expected points added and success rate, stuff like that with the run game. But when Clint Kubiak explained it as, well, we're always trying to kind of make sure that we're not putting our quarterback in a position to get sacked a lot and get hit a lot, and we're not asking our offensive linemen to pass block 40 plus times a game. Well, yes, I think you can apply that a bit to the Vikings in their recent past of either you didn't want to do it or you simply could not do it. Now, I think it's more you could not do it. When you go back to last year and how poor they ran the ball, I don't think it's they didn't want to. I think it's that they couldn't. The Vikings were one of the worst teams in every category last year. Alexander Mattison with your starting running back in 2023. Can you really lean on the run game then? Of course not. And in 2022, because there have been flashes and sections of this. So the beginning of the 2022 season, Dalvin Cook was averaging like 5 yards a carry. It was the second half, really after that Bills game, it just fell off the face of the earth and it never got back for Dalvin Cook. I mean, what did he get? He got like 3 carries or something with the Ravens after that, and that was the end of his career. And, or was something. It wasn't much after, was he with the Jets? And then with the I think it was the Jets and then released in the Ravens. Okay. And there wasn't much there though for Dalvin Cook left. And then you bring in Madison thinking, all right, well, he's a guy who's developed behind Cook, but they didn't block it well. He didn't have explosiveness. It was just not going to make up for offensive line shortcomings. That didn't work out. And then you bring in Aaron Jones, and the first half of Aaron Jones is really, really good before Christian Darrisaw gets hurt and Jones gets banged up. So you've just never been able to really lean on it and create a situation where you're talking about being able to do what Kenneth Walker can do, which is not just wear down a team, but, control that line of scrimmage a little bit more with the run game, set up your quarterback for those play actions, which is really what it all comes back to with Gary Kubiak, Clint Kubiak, Clay Kubiak, anyone named Kubiak or Shanahan or LaFleur now in Arizona. Bud Clark had 15 interceptions over 2 seasons. That's good, isn't it? We had someone who couldn't stand him either. Not a Twerk says if Christian Miller goes before Lee Hunter, you keep this $20 the super chat, if not donate it. Okay, fair enough. Look, you guys are trying to make bets with me. I'm just learning these players' names. They just fired the Vikings general manager. I have not been reading mock drafts this week before doing this. Okay. This is the ease into draft season. Let's look at the general landscape. And you guys are like, I will gamble with you over this. Or Steven wants to jump through the screen and fight me over this defensive tackle. Like, man, I don't know. He was ranked, only a couple spots behind the other guy by PFF. And as far as Hunter, as of right now, Hunter is ranked 49th by PFF, but I do like his profile. He had a good pass rush win rate. Similarly, he had a good number in true pass set, which is just like those true pass rush situations. His PFF grade, he played kind of, a little bit in different spots. I mean, I like these guys okay as prospects. Nobody's blowing me away here. And the thing with Christian Miller is that he didn't play a ton of snaps. So his highest snap total was 437. And that means rotational player. At the same time, that position is made for rotational players. You have, the Jalen, if you can pair, what if the guy is similar to a Jalen Redmond, except for a little beefier, right? And can get into the backfield, move some people around. That's got a lot of value to it. I did not know that there was so many takes on this Georgia defensive tackle. Usually Georgia defensive tackles sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Okay, so we've got your who's my favorite player, Jay, in the entire draft so far. Caleb Downs is your answer, and probably Caleb Downs is my answer. It's hard not to be. Just a dominant player in college. The Ruben Bain guy from Miami, I did see a lot of him. He's interesting because he just took over games, doesn't have the exact right profile to be a top draft pick, to be a top 5 draft pick. Arvell Reese, as far as a physical athlete, I really liked, but you guys could probably guess who my favorite prospects other than, Caleb Downs is really fun to watch. It's the wide receivers. Carnell Tate got overlooked because of Jeremiah Smith, but that kind of reminds me of Jackson Smith-Njigba getting overlooked because of Marvin Harrison Jr. And Mekhi Lemon caught everything. I really enjoyed watching Mekhi Lemon play. Sonny Styles is another one that would be really interesting if he were to drop. Can Sonny Styles drop far enough? Because that's like, remember when Brian Flores said about Dallas Turner that he kind of reminded him of Dante Hightower. And it was like, like, is that what you see as Dallas Turner? Because he was just a defensive end in college, not really a Hightower who was this hybrid, rush the passer, drop back, stuff the run. Sonny Styles actually kind of does remind me of that. Like a very strong dude, instinctual player. I enjoyed watching him play as well. There is not insanely freakish athletes in this draft, but there's a lot of players who you could see being good. And Styles, this is another thing, like you guys being sure about what's happening in the 2026 draft at this point is really, that's funny to me. Like so much will change as we get there, but Styles is a really great prospect. You're probably right that he may not drop. At the same time, we didn't think Dallas Turner was going to make it to where the Vikings were, or, lots of other examples in the past. Okay, so Ruben Bain, yes, if we're doing it by name-alytics, Ruben Bain should be the number one pick. Fernando Mendoza is a fine name for a starting quarterback. I don't know if it's the coolest name I've ever heard for a starting quarterback. Is Michael Vick the coolest name? That's pretty cool. Who has the coolest quarterback name that ever came out in the draft? Michael Vick is the one that first came to mind for me. Ruben Bain, though, is a top 15 type of defensive end name. Sorry, some of you are asking. I know, Steven. I know. I'm having fun with you, man. I'm having fun with you. I'm sure that you watch a lot of college football and are very serious about it. It's my first draft sim. Like, let's work our way up to the intense takes. Tommy Kramer. Well, Touchdown Tommy is an incredible. And my point is this is supposed to be relieving and fun from all the talk about why the GM got fired. This is kind of the point, right? Of John David Booty. Okay, that's funny. Jim says Sonny Styles did drop to 18. Well, I mean, anytime we're trying to say for sure what's going to happen right now, think about all the crazy stuff that's happened even on draft night where you go in. How about like Travion Walker was barely even talked about going into the one draft. Everyone had Aiden Hutchinson. And then like 2 weeks before, everybody finds out, oh, wait, Boomer Esiason. That's a hard one to beat. Boomer Esiason is a hard quarterback name to beat. Some of you asking about in the headline included the Aaron Rodgers thing. So I will give it to you. And I did qualify this as a rumor, but I'll put the tweet up on the screen from my friend Andrew Filipponi. He tweets this. Get this. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk does not rule out Aaron Rodgers playing for the Vikings in 2026. Quote, I could see Rodgers playing for the Vikings. It wouldn't shock me. Wow, I hope this happens. That is the rumor right there from Andrew Filipponi of Radio Row and, Mike Florio out there at Radio Row. So again, I did qualify this as just being a rumor, but the other night on the show, someone said, it's going to be Rodgers, isn't it? It's like, maybe none of us have any idea what is going to happen now with Kevin O'Connell steering the ship at quarterback. But I did do an article, and I could talk about this for a minute. Johnny Manziel's good. Uncle Rico. Ken Stabler is a great name. Joe Montana. Vinny Testaverde. Yeah, these are, you guys got some great ones. Bolarski, you're exactly right. A lot of people had Jahad Campbell as a top pick. There's always guys that go in different spots than we expect. The mock drafters don't ever get it 100% right. In fact, most of the guys who are the top, their mock drafts will get what, like maybe 10 picks in the right spot, the right team. So we don't really know. Kerpluppy says 100% it's Rodgers. Not a twerk is Team Kyler. So let me get into that. The article that I did yesterday and some of the conclusions. So what I tried to accomplish, purpleinsider.football, feel free to go check it out. What I attempted to accomplish was to look at the things that are important in Kevin O'Connell's offense and who performed the best in those important things, right? So what I mean is deep and intermediate passing, throwing the football over the middle of the field, very clearly important to Kevin O'Connell. Playing under center has been important to O'Connell and his offense. So I looked at under center percentages, and this is for all the potential Vikings quarterbacks. So your Daniel Jones, your Mac Jones, your Geno Smith, your Kyler Murray. And I also looked at sack avoidance because the recent quarterbacks the Vikings have been not good at sack avoidance, and the Vikings are third since 2022, along with like the Jets, for teams losing the most yards to sacks. That is totally unacceptable. So it has to be a consideration as well for something that they need to look into. But otherwise, it was kind of schematic, like the broad strokes of KOC's scheme. And he would know better about what types of routes and what types of timing and throws and revolutions on the football and foot angles and stuff like that he would need. But what I came to the conclusion was one thing that I have to say, and I will keep saying this because it's the facts, is 2024 Kyler Murray played real football. You cannot like the idea. I've acknowledged that most people will not like any of the ideas, but he played real quarterback. This idea that he was like a backyard run around. No, it was much more of a Caleb Williams type under center. He was actually under center toward the same amount as Sam Darnold was or Kirk Cousins was, which I would not think when I went looking for this data, but he actually was. The issue with Kyler Murray was that intermediate passing was very good, but the percentage of time he actually threw to the middle was not. And each one of these guys had different reasons to kind of like it and each reason not to. So Mac Jones through his career has been a decent intermediate passer, but he's been a very mediocre or bad deep passer. Geno Smith at times has been absolutely freakish throwing the ball down the field, but he takes way too many sacks and he never plays under center. This is crazy. Geno Smith was only under center in 2024, 11% of the time. That's never. That's like at the goal line is the only time that he was under center. So is he going to come to a team that's trying to improve its run game and have to be under center? Is that going to work for him? Does he not maybe he did that before in his career, but that was not their offense in Seattle. But if you were talking about someone who can rip it down the field into tight windows, well, that's Geno Smith, by far the best deep thrower. The guy who kept coming up in the numbers that was interesting, that I was surprised by his numbers being this good, was actually Marcus Mariota. I was not expecting maybe because the only time I saw him, he came into a game as the backup for Jaden Daniels and immediately threw a pick. Maybe that's why. But Mariota's downfield throwing was actually really good last year. And if you're looking for someone to really split the difference with, that you might be able to make the playoffs. I mean, think about Washington. They had like the worst defense in the league. He played football okay. And even since he's left Tennessee, his quarterback rating is like 89.9, which is about what Bo Nix was last year. Now he has too many turnover-worthy plays. He's too inconsistent. I think we all know that. But I didn't expect his numbers to come out as well as they did in the key areas for how Kevin O'Connell wants his quarterback to play. Kirk Cousins looked like in Atlanta kind of a different quarterback than he used to look like on paper with the Vikings. The intermediate throwing was not a lot. There was a lot behind the line of scrimmage. It was okay, the intermediate passing, but I really question if they brought in someone like Kirk, if he would be able to still get it into some of those windows that O'Connell wants with his arm strength declining. And then that brings us to Aaron Rodgers, who I thought the numbers didn't look really anything like what Kevin O'Connell is going to want for his offense. He almost never threw the ball into the middle of the field. When he did, it worked out, but it was like 5% of the time into the middle of the field, into intermediate areas, taking those risks. That's just not something he was doing. And Rodgers had a low sack rate because he got rid of the football. He had a high pressure to sack rate. So if he was holding on to the ball at all, he was taking a sack. And I think that speaks to his extreme lack of mobility. Can you run under center, play action bootlegs and stuff with Aaron Rodgers at this point? I don't know about that. That seems like it's pretty tough. And the other one was, based on Daniel Jones and his box score stats, was quite a bit different than his PFF stats, which you don't see a ton, but every once in a while that happens. And I think what that says is the environment was very favorable for Daniel Jones last year. They ran like crazy. They had a great offensive line. They played a very easy schedule to start the season with. But if you're expecting the same performance, now he didn't take a ton of sacks and he did get rid of the ball and threw over the middle more than these other guys. So that may interest Kevin O'Connell. His willingness to go over the middle was high. And I think that Indianapolis is going to bring him back, but at least there were some signs of like, yeah, he could play this way. But if you're expecting him to do exactly what he did with the Colts, coming off the Achilles injury, that might be tough. So when we get to the end of the day, it's a little like you got to pick your poison. You have to decide which one of these quarterbacks you think you can work with, whatever strength it is they have. Kyler Murray, for example, in 2024 was a good quarterback under center. So can you work with that? Can you get him to run some bootlegs and work off of a run game like Drew Petzing was getting him to do in 2024, keeping him a little more inside of a structure? But the problem with Kyler is that his downfield passing, it was good early in his career. It has not been. So is he going to float balls into the secondary and get him picked off? I mean, I don't know, maybe he had an injury that wasn't out there or something like that, but he just did not overall statistically in the last couple of years throw the ball well deep. So can you keep it to the outside a little bit more with him? Are you comfortable with him scrambling, a lot? And the X factor, of course, is his personality, his leadership. O'Connell, when he goes to get a quarterback, is going to have to decide, what is it that I'm not generally comfortable with that I can find a way to make myself comfortable with? What is it that I'm uncomfortable with that is too much for me? And, Mac Jones is very safe. It's a very safe type of quarterback pick, but it does make some sense here. I keep going back to Kyler Murray making more sense than anyone else, because I think it's hard to prove that there is someone else that makes more sense than Kyler Murray. That doesn't mean it's a great idea. It just means that when you put it down on paper and you lay it out there, it's like, well, Geno Smith's probably going to take 50 sacks in this offense. Unless, there is one exception to that, though. There is one exception, which is if Geno Smith's offensive line was top 5. If the Vikings have next year a great line, if Darisaw is healthy and Jackson is healthy and O'Neal is healthy and they draft Jake Slaughter or find a replacement who's a good pass blocker, now that might change things, because Geno Smith's offensive line for Seattle the year he took 50 sacks was really terrible. So that might change the dynamic as well. The reason I've liked the Geno Smith idea is because I think McCarthy, if he takes a big step, can beat him out and he could be a backup. He's been a backup before. He was a backup to Russell Wilson. He's kind of barely hanging on at the end of his career here. If McCarthy does not take the big step, then you could play Geno Smith and have him fire the ball down the field. And at very least, you'll probably get 1,600 yards out of Justin Jefferson at very least. Guitar Person says Mac Jones is kind of Sam Darnoldy. The problem with the comparison there, so there's right and wrong about that. The right part of the comparison is a former first rounder who was with, at the time, a very bad franchise. at the time, New England. Belichick was losing it. He was starting to date college students. He was starting to name random people he knew as play callers and not anyone who had been a play caller. Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, a special teams coach, a defensive coordinator as offensive play call. I mean, what? Like, I'd say, have you lost your mind? But I think it's clear that he did. So that was a bad situation. No receivers. They went and signed like 3 tight ends. It was very weird how things were handled there. He goes to Jacksonville. Before Liam Cohen, laughingstock. Then he goes to San Francisco and plays pretty well. And that is Sam Darnold-y. The difference between Sam Darnold and Mac Jones is what is attached to the right side of their body. Sam Darnold, when he came out in the draft way back in 2018, was a raw prospect with a crazy arm. And we saw that, and we've seen that in Seattle too. That was not Mac Jones. People were comparing Mac to Kirk Cousins and saying, well, he's going to have to do it based on accuracy, anticipation, which he did in San Francisco and won some games. But the downfield passing has to be different. Anthony Richardson, I did not include in this much. He was a great downfield passer because of his wild throws that worked, but he executed nothing else. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded like a 6th for him or something. So KFT says most evaluators think Mac Jones is a weak arm, below league average. Why would KOC want a quarterback with a bad arm? Well, bad arm seems to be a little bit strong there. I mean, he was able to win games, had a quarterback rating near 100, like played well. So it's not like he can't throw it at all. Where he was decent to good was executing those intermediate throws over the middle. So if you're talking about like those dagger concepts that come up all the time, where somebody's clearing out deep, Jefferson's breaking, 15 yards over the middle. Think about this. Like Carson Wentz's arm at this point is just not what it used to be. Carson Wentz even had his moments with Jefferson because he was throwing with anticipation, and Kirk never had a strong arm either. So you could look at it that way, as if you can throw with accuracy and anticipation on time with the play, then you don't have to have the rocket. You just have to do it right. And then you think about all the plays where Jefferson hasn't gone into his break yet. Brosmer had one of them against the Giants, just throws it to a spot and he goes out and he makes a play. It can be done, but you're not going to get bombs. Real quick, I have not tossed out there the FanDuel question of the day yet, so I want to make sure I get to that. And then back to more of your comments and questions and thoughts. And, I should also mention too that Brian Angelico is leaving the Vikings to go become the offensive coordinator of the Steelers, which is another person on this coaching staff that is not going to work here anymore. So, yeah. I mean, it's just a big change for the coaching staff this year is really the only note there. I was starting to look at prop bets, and I saw one that caught my eye on FanDuel. I want to know what your favorite prop bet is. Like, what do you have? Even if you don't gamble, or you don't, you have your just like one that, do you like the length of the national anthem, or, some random player to score a touchdown? Like, what do you like for the Super Bowl? It's a intrinsic part of the Super Bowl. So I found mine. What's your favorite prop bet for this year's Super Bowl? Mine is Kairos Tonga is plus 7,500 to score a touchdown. That is my favorite prop bet for the Super Bowl. Kairos Tonga plus 7,500 to score a touchdown. Get the big man, the former Viking. You want to talk about revenge? Oh, you all have been talking about Sam Darnold's revenge? Oh, no. This is Kairos Tonga's moment, guys. He does line up in the backfield sometimes, so. Oh, man. That's my favorite. So let me know what your favorites are, too. I can get the comments onto the screen here now. Sorry, I haven't been doing that. Let's see. Let me scroll back up here. Bubby Brister is a great name. That's for sure. Mark says new coach in Pittsburgh and regime. I'd be surprised by Rodgers' move, but I think whoever they bring in there in here, JJ should have another year on the bench to figure it out. Well, that is another approach to the McCarthy situation, is to try to find a quarterback who can actually just sort of fill the void and give McCarthy another year. The only thing for me on that is just how unprecedented that would be. Normally what happens is if a quarterback gets his chance to start, that he will not get another. You rarely see someone go to the bench and then come back. That does not happen very much. That we just don't see that too often. So I would be very surprised by that, but I mean, I guess it's possible if they brought in a filler core. If you could get away with it with anyone, it'd be Aaron Rodgers, because you would say to JJ McCarthy, all right, we're bringing in this legend, so develop behind him and then you'll get another chance. Even then, it still feels like once you hit the bench, the odds of you ever coming back are just almost nothing. Johnny Unitas, great name. Malik Willis, yeah, I did. The problem with trying to look at Malik Willis and his data and whether he fits with KOC is that he doesn't have any. he truly doesn't. He doesn't have, I mean, he barely threw any passes in the NFL. When he did, here was something crazy though. Malik Willis in his 2 years went 13 for 15, throwing it over 20 yards. 13 for 15 in his last 2 years. That's insane. That's insane. You never see that. I mean, an average percentage for completion when someone's throwing over 20 yards is like 45%. That's like a decent completion percentage, throwing over 20 yards. And he was 13 for 15. So Willis, his arm strength would make sense. His sack avoidance would make sense because he does have really good mobility. What I did also notice though, was I believe he threw something like 3 passes that went to the middle of the field. And that to me says that LaFleur was doing a really good job at never asking Malik Willis to do too much, which you know that Kevin O'Connell's probably going to ask his quarterback to do a lot. Now, I like the idea of Malik Willis because he's somebody else's development project. If you go back in the day, it worked for Kurt Warner, Matt Hasselbeck, Mark Brunell, like all these backup quarterbacks for the Packers who became starters. That worked out great. So it can be done. But I don't know if Willis would come here. And I also wonder about that part of it of he has never had to drop back and throw over the middle of the field consistently in the NFL. And he would have to be doing something new. Now he's been under center quite a bit and his mobility makes up for a lot. And if you have that kind of downfield passing capability, that you might be able to make up for some of it. But there's that one. That was the case with every one of these quarterbacks. There was always one reason that I found on paper to be like, it doesn't really look like Darnold 2024. Looks a little bit different. Doomer KO, playing bad against the Vikings disqualifies Mariota. Sam Darnold had one of his best games against the Seahawks. No, you're right. He did. And teams do kind of do it that way. But Kevin O'Connell has a history with Mariota. So that's one thing to consider, that they've known each other since he was coming out in the draft. Also, everyone played bad against the Vikings except for like Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts. I mean, Rodgers was okay against the Vikings early in the year, but most quarterbacks did play bad against the Vikings this season. I don't disagree with you that Johnny Unitas is, as far as names, Johnny Unitas is pretty darn good. Joe Namath also. How cool is that? Is that just because we know how cool he is? Would a guy named Joe Namath be cool if we didn't know? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that sounds cool. KFT says, Insider says offensive tackle and defensive tackle early in the draft is subterfuge, and they're looking for insurance for Darisaw and O'Neal. I mean, they might, but are you drafting an offensive tackle in the first round? That's one that feels like you do that when you have to, not like as insurance. You could be doing it later. You could be doing it in the third round. I don't know if you're doing that in the first round. Doomer says Jones's receivers caught everything. Well, the expectation is that they'll catch everything here. They did not do that this year. But one thing about, I assume you mean Mac Jones, that he throws the ball softer. That's for sure. Doomer KO, I only want to do Mac Jones trade if whatever we give up to the Niners is the key factor for them winning the Super Bowl. That's funny. That's very funny. Oh man, you guys and the gallows humor. I don't know if anybody does it quite as well as you guys do. Dan says, should KOC just be our quarterback next year? Let's have him. He was not a real good NFL prospect. It turned out, as he will make fun of himself all the time. Although, people will ask me this a lot. About O'Connell's quote, like, what does he think now after he said that organizations fail quarterbacks more than quarterbacks fail organizations? That if he gets rid of McCarthy, that quote is fake. Well, one thing I'd say is that, like, you're not playing for quotes, you're playing for wins. So, I don't know. But I think that when you look around the league, it does happen a lot that quarterbacks are not given something that they need, whether it's time or if it's just receivers, linemen, coaching. And if he said that in reference to Sam Darnold, I mean, my goodness, do we not all agree that he was failed by a really bad Jets organization, failed by a really bad Panthers organization at that time? And you see a lot of quarterbacks who, with time, they develop more. That doesn't mean that he's a hypocrite if they go get someone else to start. I mean, that does not, to me, mean, he's a liar or something if they have to go start Kyler Murray. Because you have to, I think he does maybe understand a little bit better what some of those coaches were going through when they moved on from quarterbacks. But I don't think that it's really truly applicable, because what was McCarthy not given this year? All right, I know you're saying offensive line, bad break for Darisaw getting hurt. That's true. They also had some of their best offensive line performances against the Ravens and the Bears when he was throwing interceptions. Yeah, his receivers dropped some passes. They're also very good receivers. He never threw to the tight end, who's good. I mean, he threw it to the other team way too often. I don't like, there's of course degrees to all of this thing, and there's context to all of it. KFT, most quarterback evaluators think Jones is a weak arm. Why? Oh, I'm sorry. I answered that before. That it's really, it's about the anticipation, and KOC has been on record saying that pure arm strength is not like his biggest qualification for being a good quarterback. And that's clearly true when we look around the league, that just who can throw it through a wall doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best quarterback. Anthony Richardson might have the best, the strongest arm, throw it the farthest in the NFL, but he can't throw a check down. SWAT says, I honestly think Malik Willis would be the best for the Vikings to push JJ, because Malik would start day one. That's the hard thing about maybe convincing Malik Willis to come to the Vikings, is if JJ McCarthy is still there, can you convince him to become a Viking if there's a competition where in other places there wouldn't be a competition? Now, I've the other day to Eric Edholm of NFL.com, I gave my pitch, my strong swing at Malik Willis to him. He kind of liked it, which was, look, a couple quarterbacks that I've had have gotten $100 million in free agency. So if you come in like Sam Darnold, as someone who's been kicked around a little, not believed in a little, and perform here, you're going to earn way more money than if you go to a bad franchise and struggle. It's a good sales pitch. And also, if KOC said, and I don't really want to start JJ McCarthy, okay, sold. It actually is. Isn't it a little bit for Malik Willis? Isn't it a little bit like Daniel Jones to Indy, where all offseason we'd be saying, well, there's a real competition here. There's a big competition. And then it kind of wouldn't be if they do something like that. I have not totally counted out the possibility that JJ McCarthy can start next year It's just, it feels less likely when we look at all the things that have been said that they're certainly not just giving him the job. We could say that for sure. But even the possibility that he can win it from somebody, it really depends on what person that's going to be. Steven says, I think there will be a lot of competition for Willis in the open market. We're not in a position this offseason to get into a bidding war with 50 plus million cap room. Well, I mean, 50 million. Okay. Yeah. If he's asking for 50 million, then no. Yeah. Then this conversation's out the window. Here's along the lines of what I'm thinking this is my proposal to Malik Willis. Malik, if you're listening, welcome to the show. And I hope you like my mock draft more than Steven did. But here would be my pitch. Listen to me, Malik. Look me in the eyes. Do you like lots of money and success? Do you know who has not had a lot of money and success? Is quarterbacks for the Browns, quarterbacks for the Jets, quarterbacks for the Cardinals. Yeah, I'll go with that. Other than like Carson Palmer, Kyler Murray at moments. But do quarterbacks who go to bad franchises really crush it? And even if you go to Miami, you could get more money from them. Hey, those are your guys in Miami. What are they doing? Oh yeah, they're getting rid of their quarterback whose supporting cast deteriorated, fell apart, and they fired his coach. So if you go to these bad franchises, you may get short-term gain of $5 million more or $10 million more than we're going to give you. But do you get long-term gain of throwing to Justin Jefferson, having success in a downfield passing game, and then getting $100 million from either us or someone else? I think it's compelling. I don't know if Malik Willis will think it's compelling, because Malik might say, yeah, but also you guys drafted McCarthy number 1 and or 10th overall, but with your first round pick, what if I don't beat him out? But then you'd say, well, what are you here to compete or not in the National Football League? I don't know. That's a tough one to get over, but I don't think he's getting 50 million. I think he's getting Justin Fields type money at best, which would be like 30 over 2 years. I don't think that there are going to be teams who walk up to Malik Willis and say, here's 50 million bucks. KFT, no one knows for sure what Malik Willis will be, but there are many instances of quarterbacks that look good for a few games, but when you play 17, they're not good. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I think what we've seen enough from Malik Willis is to say that there's some stuff there that really works in the NFL. And that's command of the offense. This is where I go back to with McCarthy. Remember, we talked about this a lot. Like, I want to see command of the offense. I want to see somebody in total control. And Malik Willis, when he was thrown in those games, had great command of the offense. I was so impressed by that. He knew exactly what he was doing. His accuracy down the field was good, and his mobility is going to travel. It's the down-to-down stuff, and as you said, like, can teams figure things out against him? We don't know that yet because the sample's not big enough. But for me, it would be, that might be something you can get a deal because of. Because if no one else is willing to really go all in on Malik Willis, then you can get a deal and then maybe bring in another veteran backup or something. But, there's risk there for sure. Troy, did you do Jacoby Brissett? Only a little. I mean, he's just not a starting quarterback to me. I know that his numbers were okay this year. I looked at him as much more of just, that's a backup. I didn't do Jimmy Garoppolo either because that's a backup. If your season rests on Jacoby Brissett, you're not succeeding. Gardner Minshew, those guys are pure backups. I mean, Arizona put him in to lose. They tanked by sitting Kyler Murray and playing Jacoby Brissett. And I know he did have some decent numbers. He was not much. I'll take a look. I just thought that Brissett was kind of a classic, like John Kitna loses 14 games and throws for 4,000 yards season. I'm going to have to come up with a better reference or a more recent reference. But I'll look at where he threw the football. Give me a sec. I'll take a look. Let's see. Passing depth for Jacoby Brissett. That's what we're doing here on a Wednesday night. That just shows you're really football. His numbers were good. Decent. Throwing intermediate and downfield. Did not throw over the middle of the field, though. This year, successfully. Had a lot of trouble throwing over the middle of the field. I mean, If they go with Brissett, that to me is totally, oh, sorry, you guys could see me poking around there. If they go with Brissett, it's entirely, we believe at JJ McCarthy, and this would be the guy who can sort of fill the shoes if everything goes wrong. I don't see Brissett as being wildly different than a Carson Wentz, though, in terms of their talent. Maybe I'm wrong, but their offense wasn't really that good. There was a lot of games where they were behind by a lot of points, and he was completing passes, but those throwing numbers are pretty good. So maybe I should have included him. Jay says, are the Vikings becoming the next Browns franchise with revolving door quarterbacks? No, the difference between the Vikings and the Browns is that the Browns have a revolving door of completely incompetent quarterbacks who have no chance of ever being good and are pretty instantly awful and then are gone. Where the Vikings have a history of accidentally backing into quarterbacks who have a shockingly good season and then put them in an awkward position. Jeff George did this. Do you keep Jeff George? Do you go to Dante Culpepper? Do you get Dan Marino? That was talked about in 99. And then how about, Brett Favre? Do you try to get him to come back in 2010? How about Case Keenum? Do you extend Keenum? Do you go get Kirk? Do you trade for Alex Smith? I think Alex Smith was always the answer there. And then, we did the whole thing. 2022, are they going to keep Kirk? 2023. But then you get the Sam Darnold, and he ends up having that type of season as well. Cleveland doesn't have a lot of that. Joe Flacco got him to a playoff. Okay, congrats. Derek Anderson had a decent year. Okay, congrats. Corey says, I like the Mariota, Smith, and Murray options. They all give McCarthy a chance to compete or play due to injury. I think it's a little early to give up on him. It is a little early to give up, but you also need to win. So you can't baby him in the next quarterback competition. He has got to be asked in the next quarterback competition, whether it's against Geno Smith or Kyler Murray or Marcus Mariota, to show that he's an NFL quarterback. There can't be this, we're going to dumb down the offense and we're going to run the ball and put in 3 tight ends and work it around him. They got to be able to play the way they want to play at quarterback. And maybe they'll have to make some adaptations, but not like just completely turn it into a high schooly offense at the end just to get them through those last couple games with good defensive play and bad opponents and so forth. He's got to go up to the line of scrimmage and outplay somebody. Now, if you go get Murray, then Murray's your starter. Geno and Mac Jones and Mariota, those guys are different. Those guys are competition. Kyler's going to go somewhere where he's going to start. Kyler Murray will not go. And if he signs, he's QB1. He is not going to agree to start or to sign where he's not going to play, because look at where the rest of the league is at quarterback. Someone's going to want him to be their QB1. KFT, if Jimmy G had never been injured, he might still be with the 49ers, but he gets injured a lot. Yep, that's always something to consider with any player, is what their injury history is. And with McCarthy, when you think about McCarthy, how crazy last year was. So he misses the first season of his career with an injury, and then he plays 10 games, and in 4 of them, he's injured. He gets hurt against the Falcons. He gets hurt against the Packers. He gets hurt against the Giants, and he gets hurt against the Packers again. 4 games were impacted by injuries out of 10. That's after missing 17. That's bad. That's terribly bad luck. But also, when we have this discussion, inevitably someone will always say, well, shouldn't they just roll with McCarthy? And my answer is, how can you? How can you? Now that one person has already been sent off the island, I mean, how can you put it all onto a guy who, played 10 games and was hurt 4 times? Doomer KO, Andrew Filipponi wanting us to sign Rodgers is like asking you to drive your car into a lake because I'm bored, and it could be funny. Florio's words are worthless. Okay. Well, look, that's why I said rumor, right? And I also think that you guys know it's possible. I don't think it's even remotely a good idea And I would much rather have Malik Willis or Kyler Murray. I guess I need to come up with my official rankings, but I don't know if anyone's going to like it when Kyler Murray's at the top. But I think that he can play real quarterback and win you real games, and he's done it, and he could throw to your wide receiver one. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of proof that these other guys have the same stuff. And Geno Smith, I looked at 2024 because he played for a real franchise. But in 2025, he took 55 more sacks. It's a lot more mileage on him. But it is realistic with Rodgers, if he decides he's going to take one more swing, that it could potentially be here. Steven, we've always had a revolving door of leftover QBs. Yep. McNabb, Moon, Cunningham. Yeah, I didn't even mention, well, Cunningham didn't make it complicated. Recently, in the last 20 something years, they keep making it complicated for somebody comes in, plays well. I mean, even the Tavares Jackson, Gus Frerotte, who's going to start down the stretch. Like that guy always tends to make it complicated somehow. KFT, could Trey Lance be any good? He must have shown something to Harbaugh to be number one backup with the Chargers. It is possible. And that's another approach, would be to get three guys, Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, and JJ McCarthy, and hope. I don't think that they're going to go with that. I think what Kevin O'Connell wants is a quarterback to run his offense. And if that quarterback is JJ McCarthy, then he'll win a camp competition. And if it's not, it'll be someone else. Is Trey Lance at this point, and you're not wrong that, hey, if he was QB2, that means that like they think something is there. But is he somebody that you think could come in, run KOC's offense to a T? I mean, I don't know. I like if, Malik Willis, we kind of would have been talking about this. I'm all for swings, but I don't know if you take swings in this scenario. I think you take swings if you're in the Jets scenario, who just hired Frank Reich and are insane and are going to lose every game next year. I guess they'll get Arch Manning. Bart Starr is a great quarterback name. Broadway Joe, great point. I mean, Joe Namath, the actual name Joe Namath, but if your nickname is Broadway Joe, you cannot fail. Matt, JJ was really bad, keeps getting hurt. Bringing in someone else isn't failing him. Right. So that's the trouble, is that a lot of quarterbacks have been injured or struggled early in their career. And I think that some of KOC's point when he said that was that if you give any quarterback poor coaching or a bad situation, bad blocking, bad receivers, that you're going to hurt their confidence, or you're just not going to get much out of them. And then you just quit on them and assume that they're terrible way too early. Now, this is true. And there have been a lot of quarterbacks who are drafted in the top 5 who have ultimately worked out. There have been a lot less quarterbacks who have been drafted in numbers 10 through, say, 50 or 60 who have come in, played this poorly, and then worked out. History is just strongly against where McCarthy is. It doesn't mean it can't work out, but it's strongly against the success once you start your career playing at this level. I mean, your odds just go down a lot when you have 10 games that look like this. You would be hard pressed to find too many quarterbacks who make it outside of like Ryan Tannehill that are not drafted in the top 5 that play like this through their first 10 games. Josh Allen gets brought up, all-time outlier. Plus his team was horrible. And that's the thing that I think is the difference when we're talking about who failed who. This team was not horrible. And it also wasn't JJ's first year. And it has to be brought up that it wasn't his first year. And I know that he didn't get to play, but he was in the building. He was in the meetings. He was doing all the things intellectually, and then came out and at times looked like he didn't really have the offense locked in. And we were still treating him like he was a rookie when we were on day number 700 of him being on the team. That's where there are details to this that are a little bit different, because I mean, everyone just started calling last year his rookie year. It really wasn't. There were real expectations. Jackson Dart's a great name for a quarterback. That's what I'm saying, right? Although Tyler Shuck played pretty well, that's not a good one. That's not a successful quarterback's name. Jackson Dart is, though. That he should have gone higher just because of that. SWAT, I honestly think that JJ needs more time on the field and a healthier offensive line. Caleb Williams looked pretty bad. So the problem with Caleb Williams' coach got fired. His first coach got fired. That's number one. The problem there's many issues with a Caleb Williams comp. He's one of the best prospects of the last 15 years. He was called generational for like three years. Now, generational is stupid to throw around all the time, but this is the caliber of prospect, right? The Bears didn't even look at anybody else. That's the level of prospect Caleb Williams was. That's a lot different than JJ McCarthy. Their team also tanked for multiple seasons. Now, I know that it was a trade with Carolina that ultimately landed him, but their team tanked for multiple seasons. They were not good when he got there. They were not a 14-win team with huge expectations in the coach of the year. They had a clueless coach, a bad offensive staff, a bad offensive line, not that great of wide receivers. And I know they were talked about as like, oh, they're giving him this great supporting cast. They had been tanking for years. Not a great defense. All those things are different. The raw talent is different. The upside is different. That's why I always throw out top 3 picks when we have this conversation. We need to find people who are comparable with where they were selected for how long they're going to stick around with JJ McCarthy. I don't think you could comp them to guys who are, and also Caleb Williams played a lot better than McCarthy, even despite those other things in his first year. He had way more moments. His statistics were better. Corey says, do you think KOC has decided he doesn't want McCarthy as his starter? Do you think he tries to get him out of the building? That's the hard part. So, I like scales. Excuse me. Let me grab some water. I like meters, Where are you on the meter? Are you in the blue? Are you in the orange? I don't know where O'Connell is on the meter with JJ McCarthy. Because if you picture a meter with a cold yellow is sort of warmish, orange is like pretty sold, and red would be Drake May. Like the Patriots are very sold on Drake May. He's in the Super Bowl. And blue would be like Josh Rosen. So where is he between Josh Rosen, where the Cardinals are freaking out? Like, we are done. It is over. How could we draft this person? We are getting rid of him and drafting a new quarterback immediately. Versus this guy's in the Super Bowl in year 2. He's going to be our franchise quarterback for a decade. Where is KOC on that scale with JJ McCarthy? I tend to think barely out of the blue. Maybe like slightly into the yellow. It's hard to even say that it's in the yellow because there's just no evidence of him really defending McCarthy anywhere outside of like the was he soft bench thing. That seemed to maybe strike a nerve. But when it came to after that, the way that he played through that stretch of games and how challenging he seemed to coach, whether it was, the dancing into the end zone is sort of one of those, how the other day there were some anecdotes about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that the anecdote alone is sort of like, okay, well, that shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it's sort of emblematic of other things. The dancing into the end zone and, hey, it made me want to dance more into the end zone when he said not to was maybe a little emblematic. And then O'Connell goes on with Paul Allen and says that, he's coming off the field telling them things that he's never heard before with their game plan. And he's saying, just run the plays. And it seems like it's been a hard coaching experience, maybe a lot harder than Kevin O'Connell thought it was going to be, which makes you think that maybe he's in the yellow at best, but he's going to have to go a long way, which that's where you can, I comfortably say they're not going into this alone. He's said that we're not going into this with nobody as the backup plan. And if McCarthy proves everybody wrong, then great. If he goes from in the blue all the way to in the red, then that is wonderful for your franchise, but you can't bet on it. I think that's really the point, is you cannot bet on it. You might want it. And I know some of you in the comment section, you want it for McCarthy, but you can't bet on it because all the numbers are not great. All the anecdotal stuff is not great. when you have the coach doesn't really defend him and doesn't call him the franchise guy or anything like that. Again, after he did, initially they were not afraid at all of hyperbole. And now they're like, well, we want competition. I mean, but if you're Kevin O'Connell and you look around and you go to the combine, for example, every year O'Connell goes to the combine and you look around, you go, there's a lot of new coaches here at the old combine who are running things. Are you going to put it all on that? I mean, earlier Steven was putting it all on my defensive tackles. No good. Is KOC going to put it all on JJ McCarthy? Like, I just don't think that's possible. DL says we've seen a lot of young quarterbacks struggle out of the gate, or even ones like Stroud and Daniels have a dip after strong starts. Doesn't hurt to have competition, but also patience. That's the hardest thing to figure out, is how much patience to have. And that's why only they really know behind the scenes how O'Connell feels. We're only picking up little things. We don't know. He hasn't come out and said, I'm done with the guy, or I love, but the problem is he hasn't said the other thing. And with the amount of people scrutinizing JJ McCarthy here on the show, but everywhere in Minnesota, everywhere in the national media, and Kevin O'Connell at no point, anytime really this season, came out and said, guys, this is our quarterback, thick and thin, and you can write whatever you want to write, but this is my guy. It was, we're going to change the offense. We're going to, I'm using Aaron Jones's word when he said dumb it down. O'Connell did not say dumb it down. We're going to simplify. I think simplify was the word. We're not working on technique anymore. Stuff like that just doesn't really make you think. Usually these folks are defiant. Like, think about like Mike Zimmer. If you walked up to Mike Zimmer today and said, you know what, I think Anthony Barr was overrated, he might hurt you. Usually these people in this league, if they are really sold on somebody, will go to great lengths to not allow any, false narratives to be out there, or at least they'll fight back against them. And that just didn't happen. Jay, I agree. Boomer Esiason, best name. And you're right about his foundation and leader for the cystic fibrosis community. Yeah. Yep. You're right. Always seemed like a great guy. Boomer Esiason. Every year, Jim Kelly would have this golf tournament kind of near where I lived, and all these guys would fly in, like John Randall, Boomer Esiason, Dan Marino. It's really cool. It was like the golf course is like in the middle of nowhere. Sean says, Jacoby reminds me of Rick Meyer. I think he's more accurate than Rick Meyer, but I love the poll. Jacoby Brissett will do this for. Here's who Jacoby Brissett reminds me of. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Not exactly in playing style, but in quality, where Ryan Fitzpatrick could be fun for a few games and get you a few wins. But the longer you played him, the more you realize we're not really winning with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Great guy, tremendous leader, and could play football, and he would have you in games, and he would have fun moments for your team. If you paid for a ticket, you didn't show up and feel like you were ashamed that you spent the money to go see Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was a good football player, but he's just not going to win you anything. And that's what I think of Brissett. If he's with the Vikings this year, they're probably still, maybe they get one more win and maybe they make the playoffs, but how much better is it really? And if he's their quarterback next year, what's Vegas, what's FanDuel going to put as the over-under if Jacoby Brissett is in the same division as Jared Goff and Jordan Love and Caleb Williams? 6.5 is what you're getting. 7.5 probably, right? I mean, I agree, KFT, that he would have more talent. He's also like 30-something years old. I mean, I'm not, what is he? 33. He's 33 years old. He's been around forever. Am I doing it again? These are, you're looking at his PFF grades. I mean, let's see. Even when he played well in Cleveland, had good grades, didn't win anything really, played okay this year, didn't, I understand what you're saying. He had a team in Indianapolis that he made mildly competitive. These are just the type of journeymen that we love on the show, but not if you're trying to save your job. But you're right. I mean, he would have more talent than before. If they sign him, I'm going to think that JJ McCarthy is starting though, because usually that's what you do. I'm just going to call you Pritt, because there's a lot of letters there. We could sign another reclamation project like Zach Wilson and one experienced guy. Yeah, I mean, you might as well do something like that. Wilson, the fact that he couldn't even get on the field in Miami is pretty disturbing. DL says, so what you're saying, unless we have the second coming of Andrew Luck, we can't realistically draft a quarterback because KOC can't coach someone who doesn't have a PhD in quarterback. That's not what I'm saying at all. You have to have someone, I mean, JJ McCarthy was so far away from average quarterback play. He was so far away. I mean, this is just by the numbers. When you rank 42nd out of 45 in quarterback rating, you are so far away. Think about if he jumped up 20 spots, he would still be a bad quarterback in that metric. And you could use that for whatever you want. Adjusted net yards per attempt, PFF grade, like whatever you want. If you moved him up 15 spots in any metric, he still wouldn't have been above average or good. That's pretty hard. Because I think that there are a lot of people who want to say that and want to say, oh, he's not perfect and you want to get rid of it. It's like, no. He didn't even come within the shade of average. And that's enough to scare off pretty much any coach in a league that is not here to wait a million years for you. And look, there's a lot of quarterbacks like this. Mitch Trubisky, Paxton Lynch. You're not special. You look at that one draft from 2021 and Justin Fields, Mac Jones, like these guys, and maybe Mac Jones will be a starter here, but has he become like a great quarterback? No. The league just doesn't really wait for these guys, and sometimes they just aren't capable. Now, I think he's shown enough flashes to make an argument that you should stick with him, but there's a lot of guys who've shown flashes along the way. Steven mentions Will Levis. I don't think there's any chance of Will Levis being the quarterback here, but maybe that he's the type of project. But you need someone that can run an offense. Can Murray see over the line? Kyler Murray has played in the league for a while and won a lot of football games, man. I mean, he has been a good quarterback in the NFL as recently as 2024. He was the 12th highest graded quarterback in 2024. If you're not doing anything over this weekend, like watching the Super Bowl, but if you're bored on Saturday, go watch some Kyler Murray because he might be your quarterback. We'll see. But I think just like if you look at how he was really playing, especially at the beginning of that year, under center, getting rid of the ball fairly quick, throwing intermediate type level passes. I mean, Kyler is a different caliber than a lot of the other guys we're talking about. A lot of the other guys we're talking about are kind of, I don't know if you have any chance there, but Kyler has been a good quarterback in the league at least 4 times in his career. That's not true of, some of the other guys we're talking about. Hunter said, is there a quarterback plan that would excite the fan base? Not just one that could be wild and fun. I don't need Nick Mullins, but one that gives us hope. I think, that's a good question. That would have to be like, that might have to be a whole podcast discussion. What would be the most popular quarterback move? Well, part of me wants to say that the most popular quarterback move, no, because there's a lot of fans who are out on McCarthy. I was going to say that maybe the most popular quarterback move would be Jacoby Brissett, because that would mean that McCarthy was going to be the starter. But I think enough fans had enough last year and are probably out on that. So I don't know how popular that would be. I want to say that the Malik Willis idea would be the most popular among fans. That I should pivot to talking about Malik Willis every day, because then you guys will hit the like button more often than you have when I talk about Kyler Murray, which reminds me of a Simpsons scene where Ralph Wiggum keeps flipping the dial that he, doesn't like something. But that's how it feels when I talk about Kyler Murray, is all of you guys just reach for the approval dial and you hit no, no, no. I think Malik Willis would be the most popular because it represents somebody who has a lot of talent and potential upside and has done at least something, like has at least walked out onto a football field in a scenario where his team really needed him to play well. And he did against fairly good teams. I mean, Chicago and Baltimore, those are not joke teams. And he was really under control and played well in those games. I think I think the unknown, because the issue everyone has with Murray is that, he's played enough and you've heard enough that you know all the shortcomings. And once you know that, this is like with JJ McCarthy, this is the forever arc of quarterbacks, which is everyone absolutely adores the person before they've ever played. And if they show flashes early on, then they love them. But then when they're around long enough to show their weak points, then everyone gets bored and tired of them and wants someone else. And then if they don't succeed in the playoffs, then everyone wants them out the door. And that's just how it goes with every quarterback that ends up traveling around to different places. It's like McCarthy after the first game. You've seen this arc go on there. McCarthy after his first game, everyone's in love with him. And then you've seen a flash, so you make excuses for when he struggles against Atlanta. And then he comes back and he plays well against Detroit, and you're in and you think this is exciting. But then the more he plays, the more weaknesses you see, and then you're out. It's like, that's how it works with all quarterbacks. But Malik Willis has only been since he's been in Green Bay, Malik Willis has only been in the flashes. So he started out, he's exciting in Tennessee, I guess. I don't know, maybe not even exciting in Tennessee. But in Green Bay, he's exciting when he first gets in for Love. And then he shows flashes and plays pretty well. He's still on the ascension. You haven't seen his shortcomings yet. I think he would be the most popular. I'm not sure that there's anybody else that would be close. I think people would think it was hilarious if they got like Jameis Winston. I mean, I think Mac Jones would be splitting the difference. Roman Gabriel's a great name. SWAT, thank you so much for the huge super chat. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Love the show. I really appreciate that. It has been quite a week, I gotta say. And the amount of support that I have received from you guys, whether it's new subscriptions to purpleinsider.football, the numbers on here, the notes that I've gotten, I try to get back to everybody, but I got a lot of emails and I got a lot of, messages and stuff, but it's meant a lot that when there's news that big and they fire a GM, that a lot of you wanted to turn over here to talk about it. So it does mean a lot. Also, while we're taking a quick pause here, two things to tell you about. One, the FanDuel question of the day. I would just love to hear, I haven't seen them show up in the comments yet. I got to keep scrolling. Your favorite props for the Super Bowl. Because on FanDuel, I found mine. Khyiris Tonga to score a touchdown on FanDuel is plus 7,500. This is, oh, shoot. Hold on. Sorry. I didn't mean to show you my email, which is where I keep all my notes. Yeah, that's my favorite. I hope it happens. I did a story on Khyiris when he was here. It's a great background story. The guy was abandoned by his mother early in his life and was raised by his friend's parents. It's really cool that, he worked his way through that. Went on a mission, went to BYU, gets to the NFL and fights his way on the field. So him being in the Super Bowl is really cool. If he could score a touchdown, that would be crazy. So that's my favorite prop is Khyiris Tonga. Also a little later in the evening, I've got Maggie Robinson did a special interview with Ani Bose, who is the VP of broadcasting for the NFL. So I'm going to bring you that in a little bit. He's the actual VP of broadcasting. So this man is in charge of the Super Bowl broadcast. And she did a 15-minute interview with him for the show. So I'm going to get you that shortly. But, we're having a good time here talking football. So I will continue to answer your questions and comments. But make sure you tell me some of your favorite props. If Khyiris Tonga scores a touchdown, it's going to be incredible. You guys are funny. hate scales. Yeah. I like them for discussion though, because it forces you to really think about, like, where are you? Where are you on the scale with JJ McCarthy? Are you in the blue? Are you in the orange? Are you in the yellow? I think yellow comes second. I mean, I think most fans would say they're in the yellow. Like, it's not looking great, but it shouldn't be over yet. And that's the needle that they can thread. But if they don't and they just go get someone completely different, that means that they're in the blue, that it's a Josh Rosen situation for them, and that what they've seen beyond what we can see, because we can look at all these numbers and everything else, but quarterback is so much different. So if we were talking about a receiver or a defensive tackle, I mean, maybe there's a defensive tackle who behind the scenes they really like. But normally what happens is the guy gets in, he plays awesome, he keeps playing, and he's awesome. Or he's bad and he stops playing and they get someone else. Like, that's every other position. We usually don't have to go into all this stuff with most other positions. But quarterback is so complicated and requires so much understanding if you're evaluating of what's going on behind the scenes. Is he getting it? Can he lead your franchise? I keep going back to this. I mean, the Wilfs spent second most money in free agency in the NFL this offseason. Their franchise, if they sold it today, would make $7 billion. The front door of your franchise, you better believe in them. Or if you're not, then you better look for somebody else that you can. It's a position that you just can't have like a lack of trust or belief in the person and then just roll with it. Dan says JJ was a latchkey quarterback in 2024. How long did KOC spend with JJ during rehab? He was 190 pounds soaking wet in December. So that goes back to the questions about the decision and going to Darnold and why there is no way we could put that all on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Or going away from Darnold, going with McCarthy instead of Darnold. There's no way we could put that all on Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. There were signs. That's the thing. When Kwesi said there's incomplete information, that's where I kind of threw up my hands. Like, wait a minute. We assumed you guys had more information than us, because I was saying in March, there's incomplete information on JJ McCarthy, and that concerns me about going with somebody that you just don't even know if they can play. And I know what you're talking about, like behind the scenes during rehab, but they consistently cited that as a reason that they believed in him. Mark Wilf cited that. O'Connell cited that. Kwesi cited what we've seen, what we know behind the scenes is that, like, he's our guy. That's what they said. So I then was like, okay, well, I mean, if you guys really believe that strong, I remember talking about that at the combine last year. Like, wow, I mean, if they believe that strongly enough to go with them, then all right, I guess so. Like, we'll see. It feels very risky to me. And it was. Hunter says KOC talked more highly of Brosmer than McCarthy. At times it felt that way, yeah. I also think he felt like, well, you know, I mean, there's no reason to be critical of Brosmer. He's an undrafted free agent who's just trying to learn. You know, I mean, he's not the first round draft pick that they invested so much in. So it's not really his fault that he's even playing. He was supposed to be developing. DLM says, feels like Kwesi and JJ are becoming the scapegoats for multiple failings and bad luck. I would agree with one of those. I think that Kwesi is a scapegoat. I do not think McCarthy is a scapegoat. I think he's the cause. And now, is that fair? Is it fair that he was put in a position, having never played before in the NFL, to be the cause of someone getting fired, to be the cause of the team missing? That's why I don't think anyone has been against McCarthy. When you listen to Justin Jefferson talk, when you listen to any of the players, none of them are like, oh man, this guy, you know, he's not, you know what, you didn't hear any of that. And I think that the reason you didn't is because they all felt like he didn't put himself in this position. The team put him in this position, and he was trying, and he wasn't ready to play. But he is the reason why your team fired its general manager and is not in the playoffs. Now, there's other stuff like, hey, maybe some folks overlook that Brian Flores may not have come back if there was a dynamic he didn't like with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. That's a possibility. And if you read into Kevin Seifert's article, it kind of looks that way. But if JJ McCarthy had been good, then you can't fire your general manager. If they were in the playoffs, you're not doing that. He's not the scapegoat. He's what made it happen, but it's not his fault that they put him in that position. So I guess, maybe in that way you could say he's a scapegoat. I don't know. But not being good enough or ready enough is what caused them to be here. Because if that wasn't the case, if they had gotten average quarterback play, they'd be in the playoffs, and we would have not made that big of a deal of Sam Darnold making the Super Bowl. We would have said, good for him. This is great. It's a Jefferson for Diggs trade. I haven't seen any vitriol toward Diggs. He's a conversation in New England, like, oh, he's a great teammate. Now, I saw that today from multiple different people about what a great teammate Diggs has been and everything. I'm like, I guess winning solves everything now, doesn't it? KFT Josh Allen, if you look at who he threw to his rookie year, he threw to the second year. They're the same guys. The only player that changed was Frank Gore, but he also was bad in his second year of throwing. So I know you're trying real hard, man. I know that there will be a lot of that, of like trying to get the rose colored glasses like as thick as you can, but there's just really no way to look at what you got, look at the sample size here of what you got and say, no, this looks like Josh Allen. It just doesn't. It didn't look anything like Josh Allen. And to say that because one guy who's an all-time freak made it work in year 3 after playing 2 full years, Josh Allen, how many passes did he throw before he got to 2020 where he really breaks out? Or when did he break out? I thought it was his 3rd year he broke out. Let me look at this. Actually, can I share the whole thing? I think I could share the whole thing. That might look weird, but I'll share the whole thing anyway. Let's see. We shouldn't even have this discussion, but yeah, it wasn't until 2020 that he actually broke out. Josh Allen's PFF grades were 65 and 64 for his first 2 years, but he threw, had 400 dropbacks, had 550 dropbacks. So by the time he reached the same point in his career as JJ McCarthy, he had how many more dropbacks? McCarthy's at like 300. By the time he reached the same point, he's at 900. He had 3 times as many by the time his accuracy was fixed. This just doesn't really work. So you just can't make that comparison. Here's the play. If you're a JJ McCarthy person, here's what you should say is that he deserves every opportunity this offseason to show what he can do. And that's pretty much it. Like that, this would be your argument. We should not call it, not some twisted, hey, maybe he's Josh Allen. Like, I don't know. That's like saying anybody who doesn't throw hard is Joe Montana. Like, no, I don't think Mac Jones is Joe Montana. You could say, well, Steve Young didn't work out right away, so every lefty is Steve Young. Like, it just doesn't, these things aren't comparable. What you should say is that when they go out to the free agent or trade market and they look for other quarterbacks, that they should look for somebody who doesn't just take the starting job and then stuff McCarthy in a closet. That's the best position you can stand on because history is very much against you. There aren't very many comps here, and it doesn't really seem like we have a whole lot of evidence to point to say that the coach or former GM, or we'll see what the current general manager, the acting general manager says, or the owners or anybody else. There just isn't too many people running to the front of the line to say, you guys are wrong for thinking that the Vikings are going to get a new quarterback. And we'll see what happens at the combine and what gets said there and so forth. But I personally think it wouldn't make a lot of sense to just call it on McCarthy and say it's over and say he should never play football again. And I think someday he's going to be one of these guys that shows up for another team and plays well and wins games and matures and everything. But this organization needs him to do it now. And I just don't know how you can do that. DL KOC wasn't standing for Darnold. I think he was. KOC was very proud of the Sam Darnold success. I think most of the time, even when he had the bad games against like Jacksonville and what was the other one? Well, they lost to the Rams, but the Jacksonville game was truly horrible. He didn't like gaslight, but he definitely stood up for Sam Darnold then. Steven, the FanDuel question of the day. The first penalty is a good prop bet. Go with the flag on the opening kickoff. Oh, love that. Love that. I mean, the amount of flags on kickoffs this year, that's something that I hope does get resolved next year when everyone finally gets the same rules 2 years in a row. Doomer KO. KO could have won the Commanders game if he was starting quarterback. Okay, yeah, fair enough. So I doubt he'll be as in on McCarthy as people point to the last 4 games. Well, nothing. I mean, it just, when it comes to evaluating anybody, you can't just pick out the things you like. Well, you can if you want to, but if you're being like intellectually honest and you're trying to come to the right answer, then you can't just pick out the things you like and leave the things out that you don't and say, see, it's only the good things. I mean, there better performances? Yes, there certainly were. But were those performances even to when you think about like the Washington game, you're talking about 160 yards passing and a shutout. So yeah, like there wasn't much asked there. The Dallas game, I will say, is a legitimately well-played game by the quarterback. That JJ McCarthy had a good game and they won it because of him against Dallas. Now they were a bottom 3 defense. They fired their defensive coordinator, right? So they had some problems, but still he played well in that game. Half of the Giants game I didn't think was anything. And the Packers weren't playing starters. So it's like, oh, over the last 4 games. Well, actually it's 3 games. He didn't even play all the quarters you'd expect for 4 games. That's the problem. Over the last 4 games. No, over the last 3 games, because it only added up to a half and a half. So when people say he was 6-4 as a starter, which is nothing special, by the way, and it's like, well, he was more of like 5-4. So he only played a half for those 2 games. Corey, Doug Flutie was shorter than Murray. Yeah. I love Doug Flutie. I would love to have him on the show sometime. I know some people in Canada who maybe someday we'll get Doug Flutie. Talk about if I will make it. How about this? If they get Kyler Murray, I will make it my life's work to try to get Doug Flutie to talk about how short quarterbacks can play and succeed. Cause and effect. Would you trade McCarthy to the Jets? Give me the pros and cons. First, I would have to know what we're trading for. Is it a 2nd round draft pick? And who's playing quarterback instead? So if the New York Jets offered a 2nd round draft pick for JJ McCarthy and the Vikings plan to sign Malik Willis to a 3-year, $75 million contract. I mean, it feels like bailing way too early, but if they're willing to do that, that means that they just don't see it, that they just don't think it's there. So if they're willing to do that, I would say, yes, okay, if that's your plan and Malik Willis is now your guy, then off we go. Then that's what's going to happen. I'd be okay with that. Anything less than that, I'm not, if they're talking like a 3rd round pick or whatever, I'm not so in on that. Doomer KO says most Vikings fans can't comprehend how terrible the Cardinals franchise is. You could certainly understand if a certain malaise washed over Kyler having to play there, or just like bad players, bad coaching. I thought Petzing did a good job with him and then only got that 1 year to work with him. And their roster was not great. Harrison is okay. Michael Wilson's okay. And Trey McBride is really good. But it's a patchwork team, and they won 8 games last year. DL says, Kyler, the question isn't as much about ability, but personality. Totally agree. He's an easy guy to dislike, but you get him to focus, and he's close to 4,000 yards at 30 touchdowns. I totally agree. And that was what I wrote in my article, was that intermediate passing makes a lot of sense. He does play under center a lot more than you think. And actually his quick game was a lot more successful under Drew Petzing than you would think. that he wasn't just scrambling around and running every play. But we are talking about somebody that clearly organization did not really buy into. Now, his previous general manager, Steve Keim, kind of left out the back door, fired there under some weird circumstances, and their owner consistently gets ranked one of the worst in the entire NFL. And the receivers, when it was DeAndre Hopkins, he was good. And when it wasn't, he wasn't. Well, you have one of those. It's so much easier to sell me on Kyler Murray having an upside and the price for Kyler Murray, that even if you get him and you just hate the guy and you want him out of your building, you can, because at least from what I've been told by the cap expert at overthecap.com, it's a Russell Wilson situation where it's not going to cost you anything. You could bring him in and decide and be like, nah, we just don't like this guy. We're going to move on. We're going to give JJ the job. So, thank you, guitar person, for your kind words there. Appreciate that. Jay says, it's my favorite episode of the week with the fans' questions and answers. I always enjoy this a lot too, my friend. Thank you very much. Could not do it without you. We're on 2 hours and 11 minutes here, and most of it has just been chatting with you guys because you guys always keep it interesting, and I appreciate that. I mean, more than just appreciate that. Like, it's really changed the entire Purple Insider. Like, Purple Insider was, for a long time, I would interview people and then I would post it, and that was it. And you guys would leave some comments, and that was like, we weren't connected. But then when I started doing the live streaming and you got, a couple of people popping in as listeners, that was awesome. Like, cool. Like the 5 of us are going to have this conversation. And I remember making producer Jonathan jump in just to give me somebody else to talk to when we first started doing our live streaming. Now, every time I turn it on, I expect a couple hundred people here throwing in questions, debating, loving. No one loved my draft, but maybe some people hating my draft and debating that. Like, it's made it great. So thank you. Richard says the problem with the O-line is Darrisaw gets hurt every year. It's not going to change. Same with an older O'Neal. I mean, Darrisaw was healthy for a lot of 2022, kind of a bad break there with the concussion. And I don't think you can call that. I don't think he had any before. And then 2023, he was healthy for, I think, the entire season. 2024, someone falls on him. And now we've got the recovery. I don't disagree that the recovery, the things that happened within the recovery were so concerning, whether it was whatever was going on with the communication, because he should not be going out there for, this is just one of those things that the explanation, I don't know, it defies a little bit of the common sense. He should not be going out there for warmups or the first 9 snaps and then pulling himself out of a game. I've never even seen that before. I've never heard of that before, where a player goes out, starts a game, and then pulls himself out, or in the third quarter or whatever, multiple times during a season. No, I mean, that was very, very concerning. So I don't disagree with you there, that you have to wonder about what they're thinking for the future of the offensive tackle position, because if you just try to go out and get some random veteran, you saw, like, Justin School was fine. At the end of the day, at the end of the year, Justin School's PFF grades, and I know that his early part of the year was really poor, but he was fine toward the end of the season. That's a backup tackle. David Questenberry's not great. Rashad Hill's not great. Like, there's not backup tackles who are running around who are awesome in the NFL. So you may have to draft one. If they draft one in the 2nd round or something, it would be very shocking. It would be like, okay, I guess they're planning on this not being a long-term thing then. And I was thinking that they're going to want people they would use this year. SWAT says, not looking forward to the halftime show. Nothing could beat Prince's performance. Well, that's for sure. That's for sure. I would just say that about the Bad Bunny thing is I'm always willing to, I have not listened to his music, but I'm always willing to give something a chance and see how it goes. And there have been halftime shows before that I was very skeptical about that I turned out liking. And there were ones that I got excited about that were bad. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Haven't done my halftime show prep. I generally haven't cared a lot about halftime shows in my life, except for watching Prince. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen of all time. I thought it was kind of fun when they had like Eminem and Dr. Dre and everybody and Snoop Dogg come out. There were some where they were using old rock acts that like the Who, it just had no juice whatsoever because they were so much older. So I don't know. He's unbelievably popular and he just won Album of the Year, right? At the Grammys. And I think there's other acts that usually show up. So I don't know. Give it a chance. Give it a chance. People are trying to make it into a thing. I've always said this is you shouldn't let people like making people mad sells. And this is a sports media point as much as anything else. What I try to do on the show, we try to have ethical ball here on the show. We try to this is my new thing. What Wembenyama said, like ethical ball, ethical hooping. We try to do ethical ball here where we work our way through numbers and we have healthy conversation back and forth. You say, maybe this will work. I say, maybe it won't. We go back and forth on why. We try to put together our cases. I try to do it that way. But if you look at who wins in sports media, it's usually the people that make people mad the most, right? They yell the loudest and make people mad. That also applies to other media. And it seems like there's a lot of success for I am just intentionally doing this to make you mad. And to me, a halftime show at a football game is not something to be upset about. It's just not. Like finding a way to get people to be mad at each other and mad over a guy playing a halftime show is ridiculous. So don't let people make you mad. And when you're consuming media where you can tell that the intent is for the person to make you mad, might be something not to consume. That's just a thought. Doomer says, tough to beat the Kairos Tonga prop. Surprising how much I hate the Patriots being back. Yeah, that was the FanDuel question of the day, was Kairos Tonga plus 7,500 to score a touchdown. It is. Good luck beating that for a better prop, a fat man touchdown. Let's see. Young cringe gamer says, I have a theory that Kwesi was ousted by the Wilfs to make room for KOC to be the GM in 2027. If things go well to promote Flores to head coach. It's a pretty wild theory. I think that they ousted Kwesi Adofo-Mensah because they know that the team needs to get back to the playoffs. And when they talk to everyone in the organization, and my guess is Brian Flores was at the front of this as well, they said, we don't really trust him to lead us through a very potentially tumultuous time. And that's why they did it. I don't think it was a scandal. I nothing that anybody wrote made it look like a scandal. What it made it look like to me was Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is a very impressive person. His background, his story, somebody who went from Wall Street to being a researcher, kind of bottom of the food chain in San Francisco, and worked his way up to being an assistant GM with the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry. And he's a very educated person. He knows data really well. And I think that he not having managerial experience before made it challenging for him to balance the things that he thought and wanted with also the thoughts and wants and needs of everybody else, and make everybody feel heard and make everybody believe in him and that kind of stuff. That's hard things to do, to learn how to be a leader of an organization that is in a win now mode eventually, got there to a win now mode and so forth, when you're not even really of that world initially. And so you're judged harsher by the people who are in the building. And then some very notable failures happen, and then the fingers get pointed at the guy who's different. And I don't think that that's controversial, really. I think what's weird is how it's timed. But when you start thinking about when did they bring back Brian Flores? When did they move on from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah? I don't know. Like those things seem pretty close together. I don't want to say for sure because no one told me that, but I mean, those that at least with Seifert putting it out there that it may have played a role in the delay for signing an extension. Like you don't have to be a Princeton and Stanford person to kind of put some pieces together there. But also, Kevin O'Connell now being handed this opportunity to resolve, fix, develop, sign, whatever it is, the quarterback situation, the roster, and get there. I think it also is going to tell us a lot about him and about his future and what he is going to be for this franchise. Now, something someone brought up to me, and I'm now saying this, so you may hear this at other times because I'm now saying this in like 2 hours and 20 minutes in, but is, Rob Brzezinski has been around for a very, very long time with this organization, clearly trusted by the Wilfs. So what I had initially thought is, well, if they go with Brzezinski as GM, then that probably means that like KOC is kind of locked in. It also might be that they in part want to evaluate this process through Rob Brzezinski as well, who I would guess is on the same wavelength with the other guys, but he's someone who's been here through multiple regimes and is not someone who they're going to remove from the organization if, whatever about after he's the GM. They're either going to make him the GM or he's going to be here, right? So he could be in a position to be the liaison that I've been talking about to the Wilfs, because that's the situation that I would like, is someone's got to be their eyes and ears. It has to be someone is really, truly in charge and the buck stops with them and everyone else is under them and they report to the Wilfs, because this structure has resulted in a lot of bickering and a lot of backstabbery and whatever, this guy's fault, that guy's fault, whose fault is it anyway? Because they're, the collaboration is also no one's responsible. You'd like someone to be responsible. Bloody Soup says any quarterback behind the Vikings O-line was going to be in trouble. Sam would have struggled too. I mean, come on, bro. Like Sam Darnold's offensive line, when he won 14 games for the Minnesota Vikings, was Cam Robinson, Blake Brandel, Garrett Bradbury, who was at right guard, Dalton Reisner, and sometimes Ed Ingram, and Brian O'Neill. That's not a good offensive line. And eventually that's what got them, right? But over the regular season, they beat the Falcons, they beat the Titans, they beat the tar out of people with the passing game, despite not having a good offensive line. And here's the other trouble. Carson Wentz won a football game with this very team where he played decent quarterback, and they had Joe Huber starting at left guard, who was an undrafted free agent. And they had Blake Brandel, who had never snapped the ball before, snapping the ball to him. This is not a team with the receivers and the weapons you have that's incapable. They were incapable of even moving the football at times. They were, people talk about that kick return against Chicago. Well, they were a kick return away. No, they were a bad quarterback performance away from winning that game, as opposed to awful and horrendous despite playing very well on the offensive line that day. I mean, you would be correct if you talk about the Falcons game. Then I would agree with you. You talk about the Packers game, fair enough. Like that, yeah, they got killed in the trenches, hard to win that way. But the Ravens, did they pressure him? Not really. Chicago? Not really. I mean, this is the thing that we went through with forever, right? This was supposed to be the person who makes it different. The thing we went through forever with Kirk was, well, it's not his fault, it's the guards. So now we're back to that. I don't know, man. I don't want to be back to that. Will I be at the I'll be at the I've been at of course, Steven, I'll be at the combine. I've been at every combine since I started doing this, except for one. My flight got canceled. And I was going to fly in the day that Rick and Zim were talking, and it got canceled. So I wasn't going to be there for that. So why would I, take another flight? Because I was already missing it. Every other combine I have been to. And your subscriptions to purpleinsider.football help the old Purple Insider get there, by the way. It's not the cheapest trip in the world. So if you consider that. But of course, I'll be at the combine. And when it comes to the draft stuff, I've always had my way of doing things, which is to get to this point where, well, normally this would be a week where I would start to look at draft sims. That's why we did one today. This is the initial part of the process. And then we get the free agency and so forth. So we get the combine, and that's where we really get a ton of information about these prospects. And we get to listen to Daniel Jeremiah. Him and Dane Brugler are the top of the top. We get to listen to them talk about this. We get to read everybody's recaps and who is moving and shaking, right? That's when I feel like I have a sense for it. These names now, I've seen them play, but during the season, I'm covering the Vikings. Like, it's hard to sit down and I'm writing on Saturday. I'm not grinding film of the defensive tackle yet. It just can't do that right now. So as we get closer to the combine, you learn more about the players, you learn more about people's opinions, the orders, the strengths, the weaknesses. And then at the combine, Chris Trapasso is going with me again this year. So that's going to be awesome. We locked that in. Formerly CBS sports draft analyst, official draft analyst of Purple Insider. We'll be doing shows there. Last year I had a spot in Radio Row. I'm hoping to do that again. I've put in for that. So yeah, man, there's going to be a lot. From the combine. It's always one of my favorite times of the year. Tons of guests, everything else. Doomer KO, shouldn't JJ McCarthy's lawyers want him to be the backup for a year? Oh, you mean like his defenders? Yeah. He'll never be a franchise quarterback if he can't fix his mechanics and run the full playbook. Surely are easier to accomplish on the driving range. I mean, that's a hard one, right? Because there's just not too many who have done that. Like, not too many who have gone to the bench and then come back from the bench. Did happen for Bryce Young, I guess. His team is still not really sure, I think. They're not going to sign him to a massive contract extension. I'd bet anybody a milkshake that they just pick up his fifth-year option, but they're still not sure. Like, once someone goes to the bench with a franchise, how many times have they ever come back and been the franchise quarterback? That's why if you got Rodgers, then at least you could kind of sell that. Like, well, this is an all-time great quarterback in his last season, so why don't you chill behind him for a year and then we'll see. That's not crazy. Doomer KO says, I don't think fans hate Kyler Murray. I think they hate it when we're in a position where he is our best option. I totally agree. Totally agree. That's true. And I also think perceptions, look, here's a thing to this weekend should be this for you. Here's what you should say as you watch Sam Darnold play in the Super Bowl, regardless of how he plays. It doesn't matter. He's in the Super Bowl. I mean, it matters, but he's proven it, right? He's proven everybody wrong who said seeing ghosts. I still see it in headlines, from seeing ghosts to being awesome. Like, come on, why does this keep getting brought up? He was a literal kid. I mean, that's like where the 9 thing is going to carry with JJ forever. It's like, come on, it's just not fair. Guy was excited. He won a game and he gave himself a nickname. Please. Relax. We don't have, I don't know. You just got to bury everybody about everything when it comes to stuff like that. I mean, performances, black and white, stats, numbers, that's what I do here. But when it comes to stuff like that, it's just, what are we doing? So when the Vikings signed Sam Darnold, think about what you thought. You probably thought, oh, the seeing ghosts guy, he stinks. It's terrible. I can't wait till he's benched, right? Like, that's probably what you thought. I hope he doesn't win the job. I hope he doesn't get in the way of McCarthy. That's what you thought. I guarantee that's what you thought. So with everything, you should look at your own perceptions, because you never watched Sam Darnold. No way. He was playing for the Jets, the Panthers. And it's actually interesting that, something that sold me on it being at least a decent idea was a video by, I think it was Jordan Palmer, who did a a video about how he played in San Francisco, and he was pointing out, and I know he works with Darnold, he knows him, so there's some bias there, but he's pointing out that, like, look at how he fits with this offense. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe it might work. And the same thing goes for Murray. Like, people have not watched 2024 Murray tape. I don't expect you to. That's why I come in here prepared with all the numbers and everything else to look at it and go, I think it's a little bit different. I think it's a little bit different than we think it is. DL missed the beginning mock draft review. Well, I could show it to you. This is what I ended up with. Kristen Miller, the defensive tackle from Georgia. People were not a huge fan of it. Jadarian Price, running back from Notre Dame. Jake Slaughter, the center from Florida. Bud Clark, a safety from TCU. And Malik Muhammad, the corner from Texas. It's a start. I mean, I wanted to draft a wide receiver. You freaking wait. You wait till I start drafting receivers in the first and second round. Not It's Work says, I fondly remember the Eli Manning rants. If you could get on another one this offseason, I might have to buy you and the little lady a night at McDonald's. Yeah. So where did the Eli Manning rant come from? I told somebody to grow up, which is one of my favorite things. I said, what are you, 12? That's what I said about the Eli Manning thing. Because when you talk about Hall of Fame, clearly a flawed process, as I think we've seen recently. But when you talk about Hall of Fame and Eli Manning, okay, if you don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame, I respect that. Just having two amazing playoff runs, and I think he was a lot better than people give him credit for early in his career, but he fell off horribly after about the 8th year in the league, and it was just awful toward the end. So, okay, I get it. Maybe you'd say the longevity wasn't there for his peak. And even at his peak, he was not the best quarterback in the league. He's actually kind of like how Sam Darnold plays, pushes the ball down the field, turns it over, but, the arm is, is playmaking, gets it to his receivers, a great leader, stuff like that. But I think it may have been in reference to, like, if you draft an Eli Manning, then you feel like you have struck gold. And I promise you, if the Vikings had drafted Eli Manning in JJ McCarthy, and Manning did struggle early on, but his team also drafted him. Well, it was weird. That was a weird situation because they got him from the Chargers. So maybe he was given a better environment and he eventually turned around, and I think it was his second year. I don't know. It feels like a reach to make any comparison. The point about Manning was, if you drafted that guy and you're the New York Giants organization and you have somebody who's going to put you in the conversation every single year and gets you to 2 Super Bowls and wins it, I mean, you're not going to hear a bad word about that guy ever in New York, for sure. So if you draft somebody that is like that level, then you're hitting a grand slam, and I said about JJ McCarthy, like, maybe there's a Matt Ryan type of situation there where, Ryan wasn't as much of a runner, but he kind of had ice in his veins and, a good arm and everything. Not a perfect comparison, but maybe that level of quarterback early in his career. It just didn't work. Anywhere near what, anywhere near what they thought it was going to this year. Sorry, Bob, if I miss your comments. I apologize for that. I try to, sometimes I do. Well, and okay, Bob, I'll read that. You want REO Speedwagon and Sticks for the halftime show. Maybe that's why I've missed some of your comments, Bob. But I am trying to talk and read at the same time, so I do the best I can. I do like REO Speedwagon and Sticks. I like the 80s stuff. As the guitar shredder, I love the 80s stuff. I also have gotten the comments onto the screen now. It's not perfect, but it looks okay. Ashley says, I think the Vikings should take a long look at Malik Willis. Small sample size, but he thrived with a legit team. And seemed to really understand their offense. That's the biggest thing, is that he seemed to run the offense the way that he was supposed to run the offense for Matt LaFleur. And Matt LaFleur and KOC have similarities. Willis can make every throw in the book. The only one we didn't see him make was that kind of over the middle type throw. Jerry, what do you think about trading for Joe Milton? Joe Milton to me would be like a Hail Mary, like the same category as Anthony Richardson or Trey Lance, or same sort of deal. Like maybe there's something there, but you can't really rest on that. Bloody Soup, clearly a guitar player there. We got some guitar people. P90s or humbuckers. Well, I have a Yamaha with P90s in it that I love. And I have a Randy Rhoads Jackson with humbuckers that I love. And I have a Yamaha Pacifica with a great humbucker on the bridge. And then also a P90. And that's probably my favorite combination. How about both? For different things. Oh, you haven't played P90s? Well, that you should try. Is Brosmer still QB3? I would assume so. Oh, cause and effect. Can you give me some sneaky options at future GM? I know Alec Lewis wrote about that. I have not looked into the GM names yet. I'm going to tell you the truth. I have not looked into the GM names because it feels strange to me to try to guess who the names are without hearing first. Like, I don't know. This guy's from Philly. I mean, maybe Alec has heard something. Maybe he's been looking into it. I have not been asking about like who the GM prospects are. The guy who gets brought up the most is George Payton. And I like that idea because he has respect in this front office and is not coming from this same regime. So then you have somebody who's much more like voice to the Wilfs. That's what I want this situation to be. Whoever is the GM, it's Wilfs, number one, clearly, then GM, direct to the Wilfs, then the coaches answer to the GM. Not this culture of collaboration thing where nobody knows who's really in charge is kind of how it came across. Oh, now it's work. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the super chat. I mean, not ever required. I try to read as many of your comments. I know sometimes I get way behind because I get off on something and start making meters and talk for 15 minutes or whatever on one question. But I try to get to as many as I can. So definitely, again, not required to get, your comment read like it is for some people who do streaming, but I really appreciate it. That is one meal at Indy for the combine. Will Levis, DK, I don't know. They had a chance to draft Will Levis. They didn't. See, Bob, you said, why don't you read my comments? And then you said, Al Gore tell me the NFL is rigged. Well, could that be it, Bob? We'll work on it. All right. Great. Well, what was the thing that caught my... Oh, Will Levis. Yeah, they passed on Will Levis before. They had a chance to draft him to make him their guy. I don't know. To me, he falls under the Trey Lance category of like, I guess you could make it defensible to do that, but is there really a reason? One more time on if anybody's watching the replay and wants to throw it in the comment section, your favorite prop bet for the Super Bowl. Mine is Kairos Tonga plus 7,500. There's a lot of them though. We'll go over them on the fantasy show, which I'm recording tomorrow morning. So we'll have that. We're going to have some fantasy fun, trivia fun with Brian Murphy and Manny, but, don't log off just yet. If you're still hanging around and watching, because, our own Maggie Robinson, who is just absolutely killing it at Syracuse, she had a chance to talk to the Vikings, the NFL. I've been doing now I know I've gone too long live. The NFL VP of broadcasting about the Super Bowl. So how cool is that for Maggie Robinson, special contributor to Purple Insider? So I want to bring you that interview before we call it a night. This is with Ani Bose, who is the VP of broadcasting for the NFL. So he will be in charge of the Super Bowl broadcast. Very cool stuff. Here's Maggie.
Ani Bose, welcome to Purple Insider. It is so great to have you.
It's great to be here, Maggie. Thrilled to talk to you.
Ani is the vice president of broadcasting at the NFL and is my former boss and has generously joined us from San Francisco, where he is on site for Super Bowl week. Ani, how's it going out there? What's the pulse check on the ground?
It's going great. You were with us last year in New Orleans, which Super Bowl week has its unique vibe, and it's starting to pick up. It's Wednesday. People are starting to come into town. As a lot of our team has been here, some of them since Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So things are picking up. We spent the day yesterday down at the stadium. Stadium looks fantastic. Beautiful blue skies. They're painting it. It's going to be great. And then up here in San Francisco, right outside my window, I can see kind of different activations and a view out to the water and things like that. So just as you get closer to the week, the energy starts picking up and people start getting excited.
That's awesome. I remember last year, you just feel the buzz of the city, and the NFL, when it mobilizes for something like the Super Bowl, is so massive. And I think that really shocked me of when this whole company gets together, it's a really powerful like city takeover, it feels like. I was shocked by that.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, I think, as Brad Zager, our colleague at Fox Sports, and we spent the Super Bowl with him last year. He has a great phrase that really sticks with me, right? You call things the Super Bowl of X, right? That means the Super Bowl is the pinnacle. It is the comparative point. And yet within the Super Bowl, as you said, right, there's a massive amount of mobilization, right? We on the broadcasting side are dealing with NBC this year and putting the game on, and 100+ million people are going to watch it. And that's almost core to it, along with the football. But then there's sponsorship and consumer products and social responsibility. There's so much around the game. And Brad likes to say, for every single person involved, what they're involved with, this is their Super Bowl. And it's a great perspective and it's a great reminder of how big this is, but also how cool it is to be a part of it. And we're fortunate. We work hard. We have great teammates, but it's a thrill to do it every year.
I have to imagine you've been doing this for years now, but I'm sure it doesn't get old, that unique feeling of Super Bowl day coming on to you. It's one of the most watched TV events all year, though. What goes into producing it? Like, can you break down how do you plan for an event of this size on the broadcasting side?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no surprise, right? To execute this, there's a long runway to get here. You said I've been doing this for a long time. I think I'm doing my math. This is my 20th Super Bowl, which is
Wow.
incredible and amazing to be a part of them. Everyone is unique. And, for us on the broadcasting side and working with NBC on this particular Super Bowl, it's about a 2-year runway, right? From the first time that we start talking to them and coming out to Levi Stadium and planning and scoping out, where are we going to put sets, where are we going to put cameras, right? Fundamentally covering a football game, they know how to do that and the basics are there. But now it's the Super Bowl, and what else are you going to add to that? And what are we going to do that's different and things like that? And so it really is. It's kind of from the first site visit to playing the game almost a full 2 years. And, interestingly enough, our friends at ESPN are having their first ever Super Bowl next year. And I just spent the morning with a bunch of them, and the NBC team was very gracious and hosted them and gave them a tour. And we've been talking to them for more than a year. So, these are these 2-year overlapping cycles to get to each one of these.
There's so much preparation, and this is on top of all the other events that broadcasting puts on throughout the year. What has been the biggest challenge this year so far?
Look, knocking on wood, I think it's been a good, solid year of planning and everything else. I think the San Francisco Bay Area Super Bowl is an interesting one for us because so much of our center of gravity and the events and the hospitality and things that go around the Super Bowl are up here in downtown San Francisco. And the stadium is down the peninsula, in the south end of the bay in Santa Clara. So that's, a good 45 miles away. And so, and you experience this, when the team is together, it's all hands on deck and everything else. So it's a little bit challenging. This is inside baseball and personal to us, but the core of our team is down there in Santa Clara. They're on the ground every day at the stadium, and a bunch of us are up here in San Francisco. So that just presents logistical challenges and wanting to make sure that you stay connected to the team and things like that. But honestly, for the game itself and NBC's production, I think it's been a good, solid planning cycle. And there's nothing really like jumping out at us like, oh my God, this was a massive thing to overcome, which I'm thrilled by, right? We always say like, what do you guys do? Like, when the best case scenario is it all goes really smoothly, and there's always going to be something unexpected and a hiccup, but we're ready for it, and we have a great kind of sync and trust with NBC that we're ready for anything that comes at us.
Absolutely. I remember last year going and like running all the audio tests and making sure comms were right. And even down to the specifics, this blew my mind of we had like a tunnel meeting for each of the tunnels going into the field. People
Yep,
don't realize this. There are so many movements of different sets and different people and different talent moving through there that's so timed out that each tunnel has like a full schedule just for itself. And that's before the game even kicks off for all these
exactly.
TV elements. It's mind blowing, honestly.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that's really changed, and it's a credit to the team and Blake Jones and Lauren Bartamioli and their leadership. We have a lot. When I started doing this, there were maybe three of us in the broadcasting department trying to deal with everything, and now we're very fortunate. We've got a great team, and there's probably about 12 of us now, which is incredible. But it lets us get to that level of detail and just work with our partners in the events department and Populous who architect the whole event for us to be that detailed with security and everybody else. This is what's going to happen in this tunnel. And here's where, when the teams arrive, NBC is going to have cameras here and NFL Films is going to have cameras there. That level of detail is necessary because of the complexity of it, but it's also a real testament to the resources and the team we have and that we're able to do that.
Totally. I do want to talk about that level of detail. Roughly, if you know this number, how many cameras are at the Super Bowl? When I'm watching on TV, how many
Yeah.
cameras are going into that?
As we like to say, it's one more than there were last year. Look, I think at the core of it, we talked about, there's 30 plus cameras aimed at the field that's covering the game play to play. But when you put in all the resources and all the specialized, this camera shooting down the line from high above and a pylon camera down on the ground and NBC's got a few innovations and a camera on a pole that we're calling pole cam shooting the line of scrimmage. I think NBC PR would probably put out a number that's close to 100,
Wow.
just different sources, hallways, tunnels, outside aerials, tethered blimp, every piece to make you have the ability and have the toolkit to show you how big and grand this spectacle is.
And then thinking about halftime, that's a performance in itself. So it's a performance for the people in the stadium, but also
Yep.
everyone is tuning in to see the
Yep.
halftime show. Like that's a big draw. Is that a totally different broadcast crew? How does that work? I think people have this misconception that they're almost separate things from the game.
Yeah, and they really are, and it's evolved over time. It's for the 20 Super Bowls that I've been a part of, it's always been a fully separate production. It's produced by experts in the music and entertainment industry. And, the last several years, we've had a great partnership with Jesse Collins Entertainment, and Jesse and his team do all sorts of incredible events, including what you've seen in the NFL, the Beyonce halftime on Christmas and Snoop Dogg and Friends this year. So we have a great partnership with Jesse and his team. That's a whole creative design and execution, what happens on the field and how that translates to coverage on the video boards in the stadium and obviously to, you know, hundreds of millions of people around the world on television. So, there are some pieces that work together with the NBC cameras, but that's fully produced separately, and over the years, Jesse and his team have really innovated where they've brought in their own full set of camera complement that's different. One for the TV show, somewhat separately for the video boards and everything else. And those are cinematic quality cameras. And, people have commented, oh, the halftime show actually looks different year over year. And that's exactly the point. That's their objective. So that it has to work in concert with, you know, the NFL and events and what's happening in the stadium and NBC. But that's a whole unto itself production and a whole group of experts who do that separately from us.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about how this has changed since you've been at the NFL on the broadcasting team. What other changes have really stuck out to you that have been super innovative or wow, we do this very differently now than when I started?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's evolved is, we talk about just, it's takes over a city or a region and there's events through the week. And, we've built up to Super Bowl opening night, Monday night, and it's a media day, and our networks do specialized shoots with the players, and our team is very involved in that and organizing that. And so that's something that's grown, other events, hospitalities during the week. And then, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the network started really upping their presence in the city and having huge, take over a park and have a bunch of sets and things like that. And we definitely continue to do that, but it ebbs and flows. And, are you going to bring every single studio show from your sports network and the nightly news and the Today Show and things like that? And it goes to different levels, but I think the biggest change that I've seen over the last few years, the networks are great because they're competitors, but they're colleagues. They encourage each other. And Fox had an incredibly ambitious plan last year, and they were on Bourbon Street, took over a bar, had their set in the middle of Bourbon Street, and it looked spectacular. It was a very cool scene. And I think, NBC looked at that and said, all right, that's a challenge. What do we do in a very different location, spread out and things like that? And I think they just announced this publicly, so I'm not breaking any news, but they're actually going to host the started their coverage on Sunday from Alcatraz on the
Yeah.
island in the middle of the bay and have, kind of this very, a lot of aerial cameras and things like that. So they'll be on Alcatraz, they'll be on a boat and basically make their way south from there to the stadium. So, the networks are, you got 5 or 6 hours to fill of pregame show and entertainment and everything else. And they really push that kind of coverage. And how do we have new and unique ways to show off where we are and have fun and do something different?
That's going to be an epic pregame show. Just the fact that someone had the idea was like, what if we did it at Alcatraz? And then
Yeah.
at NBC, they have the resources to mobilize around that. That's going to be really exciting to watch.
Yeah, and it's great, and it was very kind of like we don't want to go too much about this because it could fall through at any minute. And so, to their credit, they did it. They got all the arrangements they need, and then they're very excited by it.
Wow, that'll be awesome. I'll keep an eye out. I also wanted to ask, what's been your favorite Super Bowl moment of the past 20 years?
It's a good one. I think one is well, look, this favorite moment I'd say is, my family grew up, my wife and I grew up in Philadelphia. My kids are New York born and bred, but they are Philadelphia Eagles fans. And so they were young at the time, but they were in the building in Minnesota at Super Bowl 52 when the Eagles won their first Super Bowl. So that's kind of a lifetime family career moment that I'll always, find very special and that they got to be a part of that. And first time they got to a Super Bowl was great. So that's kind of a singular thing. But I think the other piece, and we talk about it, you may have heard me say this, but never take it for granted. Never take for
Yeah.
granted that you're at the Super Bowl. It's always incredible. And so I think kind of for me personally, like there's always the moments when you get there on Super Bowl Sunday, whether it's at 7 in the morning some years and depending on where you are, but it's just kind of soak it in. We're lucky we're down on the field doing our jobs before the game and just take a lap, walk around the field, look around, look at the logos, look at who's playing in here. And I'll do that every year. I did it a little bit today just when we were down there, but I'll do it on Sunday. And it repeats itself. Thankfully, I hope it keeps repeating itself and I have that ability, but it's a moment that I always try to take and absorb.
I love that. I remember how powerful that was. I think you even came up to me and were like, take this in. Like this,
Yeah.
I had chills. Being on ground level on the field for
Mm.
the Super Bowl is just something, it's an unexplainable feeling. And it is so cool that you've had such a huge role in this for 20 plus years and hopefully 20 more to come. Uh,
Of
but thank you for your time and best of
course.
luck to you and the team down on the ground. Thanks for taking the time with me.
Of course. Thanks, Maggie. It's great to talk to you and congratulations to you for everything that you've been doing. And it's awesome to get a chance to talk to you, here and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Thank you. I appreciate it.